Chapter 27. Actually, not too long ago, the villagers who went hunting in the forest often heard the sound of a spirit crying. With this as the starting point, the village chief began to explain. Not too far away from the village, there was a forest that was rarely visited by humans. There wasn't anything special about this forest, unlike the forest beside Villa Magnolia, where there were all kinds of magical creatures. This was just a normal forest. At most there were only a few wild beasts or weak magical creatures. Because of this, the village treated this forest as a hunting ground. Every day, they would go hunting in the forest, and it was the main source of food for the village. Not too long ago, when many villagers went hunting in the forest, they could faintly hear the sound of a girl crying. At first, the villagers thought that it was a child who had mistakenly entered the forest, and wanted to find the child and bring her out. Who knew before the villagers could begin to search for the child? A strange phenomenon occurred. Noah naturally didn't know what the strange phenomenon was. But according to the village chief, there was a hole in the sky. Because of this strange phenomenon, the villagers didn't continue to search for the child. But since then, they could still hear the sound of the child crying in the forest from time to time. Moreover, there would always be a hole in the sky from time to time, which made people's hair stand on end. Thus, the saying that the crying child in the forest was a spirit that would bring a curse when she cried, and the spirit that caused the sky to crack spread throughout the village. The villagers in the village were relatively simple people, and they didn't doubt this saying at all. Thus, gradually, the villagers didn't dare to enter the forest to hunt anymore. This caused the village, which used the prey in the forest as their main source of food, to not have as much food as before, which caused quite a bit of trouble. With no other choice, the village chief could only send out a request to the nearest magic guide guild, and invite someone to banish the spirit. To be more precise, it should be to find the true source of the crying and the truth behind the crack in the sky, so that the village could return to its previous state. The reward was pooled together by the villagers. Although it's not much, only 200,000 J, we still want to ask for your help. The village chief slightly lowered his head and bent his waist. For his age, this kind of bow was already the limit. Can you accept our request? Noah frowned slightly and fell silent. It wasn't that Noah didn't want to accept the commission, but the commission itself had too many uncertainties. Noah didn't know if he could complete the commission by himself. As for the reward for such an uncertain mission, it was neither too much nor too little. It could only be said that as long as there were no accidents, the reward would be considerable. Moreover, Noah didn't care much about the reward. In terms of money, he still had the 1 million J reward from the last activation of the Ritual Lake mission. He wasn't in a hurry to use money, so he didn't need to care too much about the reward. After pondering for a while, Noah said, "To be honest, village chief, there are too many uncertainties in this case. We can't be sure if it was the spirit that caused the sky to crack. I can't guarantee that I can provide help to all of you, so I would like to stay in the village for the night and go to the forest to take a look tomorrow. Is that okay?" "Yes, thank you very much." The village chief's voice was a little more relaxed, which made Noah smile. He tightened the long cloth bag on his shoulder like a backpack and began to think about what he should pay attention to for tomorrow's mission. As a village, although the scale of this village wasn't big, it wasn't very backward. Although the houses were a little old compared to the buildings in Magnolia, the style was almost the same, unlike some villages that only had stone houses. The inn provided to Noah was a little small, but it was impeccable. There was nothing to complain about. Under the village chief's instructions, the owner of the inn also knew that Noah was a magic shooter from Fairy Tale. He had specially come to help the village solve the problem caused by the spirit, so he didn't charge Noah for the accommodation. However, unlike the village chief, when the owner of the inn found out that the sorcerer who came from Fairy Tale was such a child, although he did not say anything, there was an unconcealable disappointment in his eyes, which made Noah quite gloomy. Let's hope tomorrow's mission can be completed smoothly. With this thought in mind, Noah settled down a little and came out of the room. He sat down at a wooden table in the inn's lobby, ordered some food, and began to replenish the energy he had expended during the day's travel. However, just as Noah was enjoying his dinner, 3 people came to the entrance of the inn. They were about 11 or 12 years old. They should be the same age as Noah, but they were very eye-catching. As for why, it was because these 3 boys and girls around the age of 11 or 12 all had a head of eye-catching white hair. Standing in the middle was a girl with long white hair tied into a ponytail. She was wearing a revealing swimsuit. Her face was very ugly, and her eyes were very fierce. Standing on the left of the girl was a boy who was wearing a formal suit and shorts like a student. His figure was considered tall and sturdy among his peers. His skin was a little dark, but his face had a weak expression. It was a sharp contrast to the ponytailed girl. It made people wonder if there was a mistake. As for the one standing on the right of the girl, it was a little girl who was the shortest and looked the youngest. She had the head of a little sister and was wearing a cute dress. At this time, the little girl with the head of a little sister was saying something to the ponytailed girl with a face full of worry, but the ponytailed girl turned a deaf ear. The tall and sturdy boy also seemed to be trying to persuade the ponytailed girl with a weak face. As a result, the ponytailed girl glared fiercely at him. He shrunk his head and hid to the side without any backbone. His face looked as if he was about to cry, which made people unable to help but laugh. This strange trio naturally attracted Noah's attention. He immediately slowed down his eating speed and observed them with interest. Just as Noah was observing the 3 white-haired boys and girls, the ponytailed girl seemed to have noticed Noah's gaze. She turned her head and her gaze met with Noah's. Noah could clearly see that the other party's face was clearly unhappy. It was obvious that she did not like Noah's gaze. Just as she was about to glare at Noah, she noticed the fairy tale guild emblem on the back of Noah's right hand. The ponytailed girl was startled, and then a puzzled expression appeared on her face. It was as if she was painstakingly looking for someone, but in the end found that the person she was looking for did not match the appearance of the person she was looking for. However, the ponytailed girl quickly threw this to the side. Ignoring the advice of the weak boy and the worried girl, she walked towards Noah's direction. Seeing this, no matter how stupid Noah was, he could guess it. The other party was coming for him. Hey! As expected, the ponytailed girl directly arrived in front of Noah's table and asked very rudely, "You are the sorcerer of fairy tale? The person who came to resolve the ghost incident in the forest beside this village?" The ponytailed girl's tone sounded like she was looking for trouble, causing Noah to frown deeply. He put down the cutlery in his hand. "Sister Mira." At this moment, the girl with the head of a younger sister wearing a cute one-piece dress came over. She pulled on the ponytailed girl's arm as if trying to mediate a fight. She lowered her head deeply to Noah and apologized profusely. I'm sorry. Sister Mira did not mean any harm." "I'm really sorry." The tall and sturdy boy also came over and bowed fiercely to Noah. "My sister really did not mean any harm. Please don't blame her." Noah nodded at the 3 of them. There was no anger in his tone. "May I ask why you are looking for me?" "My name is Mira Jenny Strauss." The young girl named Myra's delicate face curled into a sinister smile as she said these words. "Although I'm very sorry, your job is now ours." Chapter 28. Mira Jenny Strauss. That was the name of the girl who exuded the aura of a bad girl. Elfman Strauss. That was the name of the burly youth with the weak aura. Lisanna Strauss. That was the name of the little girl who seemed like an obedient little sister. It was easy to tell the relationship between the 3 just by looking at their surnames. In fact, the 3 of them were indeed siblings. Of course, Noah only found out about this after the fact, including Elfman and Lisanna's names. As for now, Noah was only dumbfounded. "My job belongs to you guys?" Noah looked at Mira, Elfman, and Lisanna with a confused expression on his face. After a while, he opened his mouth and said, "What's the matter?" "I'm sorry, but I don't understand what you mean. Can you explain it more clearly?" "I think what I said just now has explained everything very clearly." Mira put her hands on her hips and looked down at Noah. Her delicate face was not inferior to a luscious, but it was filled with contempt that destroyed her beauty. "Moreover, looking at you, I don't think you have the ability to solve this ghost incident. So be smart and give us the job." At this point, Myra's words were no longer as simple as being arrogant and looking for trouble. Instead, she had offended him. Therefore, even Noah, who was very good at controlling his emotions, couldn't help but feel a little displeased with Myra's words. He unconsciously reached out his hand and touched the long cloth bag at the side. He looked at Mira and the corners of his lips curled up. You mean to say that you have the ability to solve this matter even though you're about the same age as me? Hearing this, Mira did not respond to Noah's words immediately. Instead, he glanced at the strip-shaped cloth bag that Noah was stroking. He still had a sinister expression on his face, but a hint of vigilance secretly rose in his heart. After all, it wasn't difficult for people to guess what was inside a cloth bag of this shape. However, Mira didn't have the slightest intention of letting him off. You think you're a magic shooter just because you're armed? It's pretty easy to be a magic shooter for fairy tale. Noah, who had just turned a blind eye to Mira's words, suddenly opened his eyes. His gaze towards Mira began to turn cold, and even the mana in his body began to boil a little. Can I take it that you're provoking fairy tale? Ever since he was adopted by Makarov, Noah had lost control of his emotions a few times in fairy tale, causing the mana in his body to go berserk and almost destroyed the entire fairy tale. Noah constantly reminded himself that he had to remain calm no matter what happened. This was also the reason why Noah, at such a young age, was able to display a calmness that even adults couldn't possess. It was also because of this that Laxus, who usually didn't get along with Noah, would target Noah. Noah's emotions weren't easily affected by Laxus, which made Laxus somewhat annoyed, or rather, somewhat afraid of his younger brother. His attitude towards Noah was extremely bad. With Laxus's character, he wouldn't admit that he was somewhat afraid of his younger brother, who wasn't easily affected. This was why he targeted Noah every time, attempting to break Noah's calmness that even he was somewhat afraid of. Therefore, if Laxus was present, he would definitely know that there were only 3 factors that could affect Noah's emotions. The first was regarding Makarov, who had raised Noah. The second was causing harm to the people close to Noah. The third was any insult to the fairy's tale. It could be said that Mira's words had unintentionally triggered Noah's emotions. Mira seemed to have felt a flash of mana from Noah's body. Her heart tightened, and her body stiffened slightly. Although it was only for a moment, when she felt that flash of mana from Noah's body, a sense of danger arose in her heart. Sister Mira. Lysana didn't seem to have felt anything. When she saw Noah's gaze turn cold, she hurriedly grabbed Mira's hand and lowered her head to Noah. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Please don't be angry, Elfman said with a nervous expression, but he still spoke up. We really don't mean any harm. They were already here looking for trouble, and they still didn't mean any harm? If it was anyone else, they would have definitely lost their cool and started fighting with the trio in front of them. Fortunately, Noah wasn't someone who acted rashly. He took a deep breath and calmed his slightly fluctuating emotions, looking straight at the trio in front of him. I roughly understand why you're here. You want to take on the mission issued by this village, right? Mira snorted coldly and turned her head away, as if she didn't want to explain anything. Elfman nodded repeatedly, while Lysana seemed to be a little angry at her sister's actions. The 3 siblings' reactions were so different that Noah couldn't help but feel a little helpless. I just want to ask. Noah stared at the trio in front of him. Were you sent by the ruler of the underworld, Phantom's Lord? Ruler of the underworld, Phantom's Lord? Mira, Elfman, and Lysana were all stunned, somewhat at a loss. Seeing this, Noah knew that the 3 siblings weren't sent by the ruler of the underworld, Phantom's Lord. Just like the last time, they were here to make things difficult for Fairy Tale. Then why are you stealing my job? Noah directly asked. I don't think I've offended you, right? Hearing Noah's words, Elfman and Lysana actually lowered their heads, looking somewhat guilty. Mira was the only one who didn't hold back. You don't need to know that. Anyway, you're a magic shooter of Fairy Tale. Just go back to the guild and change your mission. Leave the mission here to us. Noah raised an eyebrow and ignored Mira, turning his gaze to Lysana. He could see that among the 3 siblings, Mira was the standard delinquent girl, and it was hard to communicate with her reasonably. Elfman's personality was rather weak, and even if he was asked, he would only stutter. Only this youngest girl called Lysana was easier to talk to, and wouldn't ask so many questions. I'm really sorry. Lysana's first sentence was still an apology, and her cute face was full of regret. But we really need this mission. If possible, I hope you can give it to us. Lysana, why are you saying so much to him? Mira looked at Noah with an unkind expression. Kid, I said before that your job is ours. If you don't want to be beaten up by me and then run back home, just give up. Sister Mira. Lisanna's tone was full of anger and helplessness. Obviously, she was already very hurt by her sister's bad attitude. Noah sighed, picked up the long cloth bag at the side and stood up. Although I don't know why you're saying that you need this mission, I'm guessing that you've gone to the village chief's house and been told that I've already accepted the mission. That's why you're looking for me and hoping that I'll give up, right? After saying that, Noah put on a mischievous smile and said, since that's the case, then try to steal my job. After saying that, without waiting for Mira and the others to say anything, Noah ran out. Don't run. Elfman and Lisanna were shocked, and Mira was so agitated that she cried out, grabbing one in each hand and running out of the door. Chapter 29. Night fell quietly. In this world completely shrouded in darkness, all signs of life seemed to have been erased. Even the vast forest that was full of vitality couldn't escape the engulfment of the darkness. When night fell completely, Noah arrived at the entrance of the forest that was engulfed in darkness. Looking at the vast forest that stretched as far as the eye could see, he sighed in his heart. If possible, Noah really didn't want to carry out the mission of dispelling ghosts at night. Although Noah wasn't afraid of ghosts, that didn't mean that he liked ghosts. Therefore, in the face of an unknown existence like a ghost, even if Noah didn't know whether it actually existed or not, he still hoped to carry out this mission during the day. At least his mood would be a lot more relaxed. Unfortunately, the appearance of the three Strauss siblings disrupted Noah's plan. To be honest, although the three Strauss siblings' request was somewhat unreasonable, Mira was right. For Noah, who was the magic shooter of Fairy Tale, it wasn't a big deal even if he gave up on this mission. At most, he would just return to the guild and get another one. Didn't Makarov also say that if there was no way to complete the mission, there was no need to force it and just give up? The Strauss siblings seemed to have some reason to need this commission. If it were another situation, Noah wouldn't mind giving this commission to them, not for the sake of the arrogant Mira and the timid Elfman, but for the sake of the cute little girl Lisanna, who was reasonable. Noah didn't mind giving this commission to them. However, this was Noah's first real job. If he encountered a setback in his first job and had to give up on the mission, Noah would inevitably feel disappointed and even lose confidence in himself. Not to mention, he didn't encounter any setbacks that forced him to give up on the mission. It was just a few people who came out and said that they wanted to steal his job. Not to mention they had that kind of attitude. Looking back, Noah confirmed that Mira, Elfman, and Lisanna hadn't caught up with him. He carried his strip-shaped bag and walked into the forest. The forest at night was very dangerous. In the more than a year in Magnolia, Noah ran into the forest almost every day to train his control of mana and swordsmanship. Therefore, Noah knew very well how dangerous the forest at night was. Other things aside, many of the truly dangerous magical creatures were frequently active at night in search of prey. Coupled with the restrictions of terrain and vision, the forest at night was often very advantageous to magical creatures. On the contrary, it was very disadvantageous to humans. Fortunately, this forest wasn't full of magical creatures like the forest in Magnolia. At most, there were some ferocious beasts. There was a chance of magical creatures appearing. However, the monsters in this type of forest were usually outsiders. Their numbers were pitifully small, and their strength was uneven. After all, powerful magical creatures were generally able to occupy a place where they lived, and some even occupied an entire territory. Only the weak magical creatures would be chased out of their habitat or escape in search of other places. Under such circumstances, this forest wasn't considered dangerous. Even the villagers of a small village often came here to hunt. Noah believed that he could handle such a forest at night. Currently, it was summer in the Fiori Kingdom. However, the temperature in the forest was quite chilly. It was hard to believe that it was summer. At night, the atmosphere in the forest was different from during the day. It was as if there was an additional cold air that made one's hair stand on end. As Noah walked into the depths of the forest, he breathed in the gloomy and cold air. A sense of nostalgia inexplicably rose in his heart. No, it wasn't strange at all. Because Noah used to visit the forest at night in Magnolia. The forest in front of him seemed to be connected to the scene in his memory, which made Noah feel nostalgic. However, compared to the forest in Magnolia, which was full of magical creatures, this forest was undoubtedly much more reassuring. For example, there wouldn't be the pungent smell of magical creatures here. For example, there wouldn't be insects larger than a human falling from the trees here. For example, there wouldn't be strange birds chirping here. For example, there wouldn't be spiders the size of a fist running around here. At most, there would be snakes crawling on the road, or owls with glowing eyes hiding in the trees. Thinking about these strange things and comparing the forest in Magnolia to the forest here, Noah unknowingly began to walk around aimlessly. It couldn't be helped. The village chief said that there would be spirits crying in this forest from time to time, but he didn't say exactly where to hear these cries. This wasn't strange. After all, Noah told the village chief that he would only carry out the mission tomorrow. If that was the case, the village chief would have explained in detail before he set off tomorrow. Thinking about this, Noah was a little annoyed. If he had known this would happen, he would have gone to the village chief's house first. Woo woo woo. Just as Noah was immersed in his own annoyance and was about to sigh, a crying sound came from the surroundings, which made Noah freeze on the spot. Woo woo woo. Before Noah could fully react, the crying sound became clearer and clearer, which woke Noah up from his stupor. At this time, Noah noticed two details. First, the crying sound was very young. The owner of the crying sound was definitely not more than 10 years old, and it was a female voice. Second, in addition to the crying sound gradually approaching Noah's direction, there was also a faint sound of footsteps coming from the depths of the forest. It should be the footsteps of the owner of the crying sound. It wasn't hard to imagine that the other party was crying while walking. Footsteps. Noah tilted his head in puzzlement. Isn't it a spirit? Do spirits need to walk and make footsteps? With such doubts in his mind, Noah carried the long cloth bag and leaped, silently hiding in the trees to the side. His gaze was cast forward, looking in the direction of the crying and footsteps. After an unknown amount of time, a very small figure slowly walked over from the depths of the forest, imprinted in Noah's eyes. It was a little girl. She was about 7 or 8 years old, 4 or 5 years younger than Noah. The little girl had a head of dark blue short hair that was unusually eye-catching even in the dark night. She wore an extremely thin shirt, and it was definitely very cold in the forest at night. However, the little girl was completely unaware of it, and didn't see her body shivering from the cold. Instead, she lowered her head and rubbed her eyes, crying nonstop as she walked over. Woo woo. Grandini, where are you? It's so dark here. I'm so scared. Listening to the heart-wrenching cries and watching the little child walking towards them while crying, Noah was really confused. Was this a spirit? She didn't look like one at all, did she? Could it be that the crying in the forest was actually this child and not some spirit? Didn't that mean that this child had been crying in the forest all this time? Noah fell silent, and after a while he walked outside. The little girl seemed to have noticed the strange sounds around her. Her crying stopped abruptly, and she wiped the tears off her face. She looked around in panic, and then hurriedly hid in the bushes at the side. Seeing this, Noah was basically certain. Whether or not this little girl was the so-called spirit, she must have stayed in the forest for quite some time. Otherwise, why would a normal child hide when they heard the strange sounds? The child in front of him must have known that there were all sorts of ferocious beasts in the forest, and that it would be very dangerous to encounter them. That was why she hid when she heard the strange sounds. Chapter 30. At this time, Noah had somewhat forgotten his original intention of coming here. He came to the bush where the little girl was hiding, squatted down, and gently parted the bush in front of him. In the next moment, the figure of a blue-haired little girl, hugging her knees and curling up into a ball, looking at Noah with a frightened expression, once again entered Noah's field of vision. Looking at Noah's face that suddenly appeared in front of her, the blue-haired little girl crawled back in horror, her face full of fear. Don't be afraid, I'm not a beast, nor am I a magical creature. I have no malice towards you. Noah tried to soften his tone as much as possible, with a gentle smile on his face, and extended his hand towards the blue-haired little girl. Come over here. Looking at the face in front of her that was filled with a gentle smile, the fear in the blue-haired little girl's heart was incredibly reduced by more than half. Her pale face also regained some color, but she still stared at Noah's hand that was stretched out in front of her with a fearful expression, her petite body trembling slightly. Noah didn't rush the other party, but maintained the appearance of extending his hand with a smile, waiting for the blue-haired little girl to react. He didn't show the slightest bit of impatience, allowing time to gradually pass. The blue-haired little girl secretly observed Noah like this, and seemed to have determined that the other party wouldn't hurt her. She timidly extended her little hand, trembling, and placed it on Noah's extended hand. At the moment of contact, Noah and the blue-haired little girl both had different feelings. Noah felt that the little hand in the center of his palm was really too cold, so cold that it seemed to have lost the temperature that a human body should have, which made Noah very surprised. The blue-haired little girl had a completely opposite feeling, only feeling that the palm that embraced her little hand was really too warm. So warm that the blue-haired little girl couldn't help but have a trace of nostalgia. As a result, the blue-haired little girl's hand tightened uncontrollably, as if she was grabbing onto a life-saving straw. She held onto Noah's hand tightly. Under the night sky in the forest, two children of different ages, one young and one old, held each other's hands tightly. In the absence of witnesses, they formed a bond that no one knew but was difficult to break. Late at night in a quiet corner of the forest, a wisp of smoke floated into the sky. Carried by the wind, it drifted into an unknown distance. The blazing red bonfire emitted light and heat that dispelled the darkness and gloomy coldness. The game roasted beside the bonfire also emitted a fragrance that made one's stomach tighten. Beside the bonfire, the blue-haired little girl sat there, wolfing down the freshly roasted meat in her hand. Her little cheeks had already puffed up due to the excessive amount of food stuffed into her mouth. Along with her owner's chewing, she moved little by little, looking extremely adorable. Obviously, the blue-haired little girl hadn't seriously eaten a full meal for a very long time. After coming to this conclusion, Noah also allowed the little girl to continue eating in a way that would make people feel cute while he sat quietly on the side, roasting the rest of the freshly hunted game while observing the blue-haired little girl. The blue-haired little girl's name was Wendy Mabel. This was also something that Noah just found out. It was believed that no one would think that such a child would be a spirit. The same went for Noah. Therefore, seeing Wendy eating heartily, Noah was also happy to continue observing Wendy. In the end, he still couldn't see any signs of a spirit from this cute little girl in front of him. Unknowingly, time passed quietly. Although it was obvious that she hadn't eaten a full meal for a long time, Wendy was still a child after all. Moreover, she was still a girl. Her appetite wouldn't be that big. After finishing the small game in her hand, she seemed to be full. Holding her small hands, Wendy secretly sized up Noah. After a long time, she mustered up the courage to speak with a voice as soft as a mosquito. Thank you. Are you full? Noah shook his head and waved the roasted game in his hand. Do you need a little more? No need. Noah shrugged indifferently and stuck the roasted game in his hand beside the bonfire, then looked at Wendy. Then Wendy, can I call you this? Wendy nodded her head, and then emphasized again. I'll call you Big Brother Noah, can I? If you don't mind. Noah scratched his cheek and asked. Then Wendy, why are you here? Why are you crying so sadly? I've always lived here. Wendy's small face showed a sad expression, and her watery eyes began to moisten. I can't find my mother, I can't find Grandine. Can't find your mother. Noah sighed. In other words, you're lost, right? No. Wendy shook her head and said, I remember the way home, but Grandine is no longer there. Grandine suddenly disappeared and doesn't want me anymore. As she spoke, Wendy's moist eyes became misty. Drops of tears flowed out, and she began to sob. Even though Noah was usually able to control his emotions, he had never encountered a girl crying like this before. He was at a loss for what to do. He could only sit beside Wendy and pat her back, comforting her as if he was coaxing a child. Wendy, don't cry. Tell me what your mother looks like. I'll help you find her, okay? However, in the next moment, Wendy sobbed and said something that shocked Noah. Grandine is a dragon. A very, very gentle dragon. Dragon? Of course, Noah knew of such an existence. Wendy's mother was a dragon? Wasn't that the same as Naz, who was raised by a dragon? You. At that moment, Noah said to Wendy in astonishment. You're also a dragon slayer, Archmage? Also. This time it was Wendy's turn to look at Noah with a tear-stained face. letting Noah understand. The little girl in front of him who was 4 or 5 years younger than him was most likely the second Dragon Slayer Archmage other than Naz. It was also very likely that she had also learned the ancient lost magic that was used to fight against Dragon Slayer magic. Since when did such a powerful magic become so worthless? Noah only had time to feel this way in his heart. In the next second, a sudden phenomenon interrupted his thoughts. Rumble. In the sky, a deafening sound of thunder suddenly resounded. Ah! The timid Wendy let out a scream and threw herself into Noah's arms without hesitation. Noah only hugged the slender and soft body in his arms reflexively. He raised his head and looked at the sky. Then, his pupils suddenly shrank to the size of a needle tip. Rumble. Amidst the thunderous roar, the clouds in the sky that were shrouded in darkness suddenly rolled up. It was as if there was a whirlpool in the middle, constantly sucking in the surrounding clouds and gradually rotating. Gradually, the entire sky of the forest was replaced by a huge vortex of black clouds. The center of the vortex was faintly emitting light and emitting a shocking roar. This scene was as if there was a hole in the sky. A hole in the sky. Tightly holding Wendy in his arms, Noah's face was full of uncertainty as he stared at the vortex-like sky. Could it be that this is the curse-like phenomenon that was summoned by the cries of ghosts that the village chief mentioned? Thinking of this, Noah couldn't help but look at Wendy, who was shivering in his arms with a face full of fear. It seemed that Wendy didn't know what was going on with this strange phenomenon. Moreover, at the beginning Wendy was also crying, but at that time she didn't summon any strange phenomenon. Therefore, this strange phenomenon was definitely not caused by Wendy, at least not on purpose. At this time, the strange phenomenon in the sky changed again. Chapter 31. The whirlpool-like sky suddenly came to a standstill without any prelude. Even the center of the whirlpool was directly fixed there, and the light inside gradually dissipated at a speed visible to the naked eye. Seeing this scene, Noah, who was just thinking about whether to leave or not, was stunned on the spot. Who? Under Noah's gaze in the sky, a gust of wind blew from the huge whirlpool, as if it was higher than the sky. To be more precise, it should be said that it was blowing down from above the clouds, stirring up the whirlpool-like pitch-black clouds. Looking at this scene in a daze, and at the entire irregular sky that was stirred up into a mess, Noah was at a loss. Although, in order to be able to adapt to life as soon as possible, when he was just adopted by Makarov, Noah also worked very hard to learn the culture and knowledge of this world. Not only did he learn all the words in a short 2 to 3 months, he also learned a lot of knowledge related to the magic world. But such a development had long exceeded Noah's scope of understanding. It was no wonder that Noah was at a loss. However, the loss only lasted for a short period of time. After a while, Noah noticed. The whirlpool-like wind that stirred up the whirlpool-like sky seemed to be blowing down from a place higher than the clouds, but under Noah's outstanding sensing ability, the real driving force of this whirlpool-like wind was nowhere to be hidden. In Noah's sensing, the power that stirred up the whirlpool-like sky into a mess was a surge of magic that rose from the ground. Obviously, this was a man-made situation. Moreover, the location of the magic was not elsewhere, but in this forest, not far from Noah's location in the depths of the forest. Aware of this, Noah directly cast his gaze towards the place where the magic soared into the sky, and his eyes began to flicker. Should I go and take a look? Brother Noah. Wendy, who was in Noah's arms, seemed to have recovered from her fear. She pulled on Noah's clothes, and her big watery eyes stared straight at Noah's face, while her finger pointed to the sky. The sky, the atmosphere, everyone has become so strange, so chaotic. Hearing this, Noah lowered his head in surprise and met Wendy's gaze. You can feel the state of the sky and atmosphere? Yes. Wendy nodded without hiding anything. I am the sky's dragon-slaying sorcerer. Noah was relieved. The Dragon Slayer magic was a powerful magic that transformed the user's physique into that of a dragon, and was used to fight against and kill dragons. However, the Dragon Slayer magic wasn't just a single type of magic. Instead, it was like the entire magic system having an entire series of spells. For example, Naz was a Fire Dragon Slayer Archmage and used the Fire Dragon Slayer magic. His entire person was like a fire dragon. Not only did he have super destructive power, he could also recover his mana and stamina by devouring flames. Wendy was the Archmage of the Sky's Dragon Slayer, so she was undoubtedly using the Sky's Dragon Slayer magic. Therefore, it wasn't strange for Wendy to be able to sense the state of the sky and atmosphere. Looking up, Noah looked at the whirlpool that had completely disappeared, and the sky that was gradually returning to its original calm state. Then he looked at the source of magic that was gradually converging in the depths of the forest. After pondering for a moment, he stood up. "Wendy," Noah said as he put Wendy down and pointed at the source of magic that was almost disappearing. "I plan to go over there and take a look." "I'll go with you," Wendy said without hesitation and tightly grabbed Noah's corner, looking like she was about to cry. "Brother Noah, don't leave me alone." Okay. Noah could only smile bitterly and compromise, holding Wendy's hand. "Don't worry, I won't leave you alone." "Yes." Wendy smiled through her tears. Holding Wendy's hand and following his own senses, Noah tried to reduce the sound of his footsteps as much as possible and slowly walked towards the source of the whirlpool of magic that had completely disappeared. The surrounding darkness blocked most of Noah and Wendy's vision, and the surrounding trees and bushes were filled with the low roars of beasts. However, Noah was unwavering as he walked towards the source of the magic, while Wendy hid behind Noah, her face full of fear. Not long after, the two of them arrived at a vast open space. The magic that had stirred up the whirlpool in the sky was released from here. Now that magic had already disappeared, but Noah could clearly feel that in this open space, the existence of the same origin as that magic was still there, and it didn't disappear just like that. And in the center of that vast open space, there seemed to be a figure that was about the same size as Noah standing there, with its back facing Noah and Wendy. Wendy hid her small body behind Noah's back, only sticking out her head. Her small hand that was grabbing Noah's clothes and hand was getting tighter and tighter, as if she was nervous. Noah fully displayed his ability to control his emotions. The more he felt at this moment, the calmer he became. Holding Wendy's hand, he walked into the open space. Only after entering the open space did Noah see the back of the figure in the center of the open space. That was indeed the back of a figure that was about the same size as Noah. Moreover, the other party also had a head of dark blue short hair that was not much different from Wendy's. But from the other party's back, the other party should be a boy. From this boy, Noah felt the magic that he had just sensed. Needless to say, the magic that was stirring up the whirlpool-like sky was the doing of this person in front of him. Brother Noah. Wendy, who was hiding behind Noah, was very nervous and scared as she pulled Noah's hand. Noah stopped in his tracks and didn't turn back to look at Wendy. Instead, he stared at the back of the figure in front of him and said in a deep voice, "Who are you?" "Oh." The figure with its back facing Noah and Wendy gently raised its head and turned around, exposing its face in front of Noah and Wendy. Looking at the face that was exposed in front of them, Noah was speechless for a moment, and Wendy's whole body trembled, showing even more fear. Because, on the right side of the other party's face, there was a sinister tattoo that extended from the eye socket to the cheek, just like the eye of a devil. If this scene was seen in the daytime it would be fine, but now, under the influence of the night and the atmosphere, this tattoo looked a little gloomy, and made people feel very uncomfortable. Noah subconsciously protected Wendy behind him, and his other hand was already holding the strip-shaped cloth bag tightly, and his voice was a little cold. "Who are you?" The second time he asked, he still didn't get any response. However, Noah and Wendy were both stunned. Bang! The young man with the tattoo on his face suddenly went limp and fell to the ground, and didn't move at all. "Ah!" Wendy let out a small cry of surprise, and even Noah frowned. The scene suddenly became a somewhat strange silence. "Brother Noah." Wendy poked her head out from behind Noah, and her young voice was full of confusion. "That person, is he not feeling well?" "It's because I don't know if he is or not that big brother is a little troubled." Noah's face hung a helpless smile. "I'll go take a look, Wendy, you wait here for a moment." Wendy hesitated, but she knew that Noah was doing this to protect her. Although she was very unwilling, she nodded obediently, let go of Noah, and ran to the side to hide behind a tree trunk. Noah then walked in the direction of the young man on the ground, and came to the other party's side, squatted down, stretched out his hand, and looked at the other party's condition. The young man on the ground was a little short of breath, and his face didn't look very good, and even looked like he was in slight pain, but his eyelids didn't tremble. This kind of state allowed Noah to easily determine what happened. Magic overused, so that's why he fainted, right? Noah pondered for a moment, and then seemed to have made a decision, and helped the other party up. Wendy, you live here so you should know where there are caves and such, right? Wendy was stunned. Chapter 32. The next day, warm sunlight sprinkled down from the sky, driving away the gloomy coldness lingering in the forest. Finally, there was some summer heat under the sky. A young boy with a tattoo on his face woke up from his sleep and slowly opened his eyes. Just as he opened his eyes, the young boy heard a very cute, yet very young little cry of surprise. Big brother Noah, that person woke up. Who? The thorny young man abruptly opened his half-opened eyes. His body sat up like a loose spring. His face was full of vigilance as he looked around. The thorny teenager found himself in a cave of unknown origin. The cave wasn't very big, smaller than the room of an ordinary family. The young boy could clearly see the fierce sunlight outside the cave and the surrounding walls of the cave. As for himself, he was lying on a protruding platform under the innermost wall of the cave. As for the entrance of the cave, the young boy saw two people. One of them was a boy of 11 or 12 years of age with short black hair and eyes as deep as the stars. In front of him was a long cloth bag that seemed to contain some kind of weapon leaning on one of his shoulders. His whole body was emitting an extraordinary aura. The other was hiding beside the young boy. She poked her head out from the side of the young boy and looked at him with eyes full of doubt, curiosity, and a trace of fear. She was about 7 or 8 years old. At this time, the young boy was sitting on the ground at the entrance of the cave with his back against the wall. He stretched out a hand and stroked the head of the little girl who was hiding beside him. At the same time, he turned his head to look at the young boy with a slight smile on his face. "You're awake." The young boy didn't immediately respond, but the vigilance in his eyes lessened. After a moment of silence, he spoke softly. "You are Noah Dole from Fairy Tale. You can call me Noah." Noah briefly introduced himself and patted the head of the blue-haired little girl beside him. "She is Wendy." "Hi." "Hello," Wendy said in a timid manner. Then she didn't say anything else. Fairy Tale. The spiky young man's eyes flickered a few times. He lowered his head and hesitated for a moment before introducing himself. "My name is Jalal. Did you save me?" "I'm not the one who saved you." Noah shrugged and continued to pat Wendy's head. "The one who saved you was Wendy. She was the one who used healing magic to help you recover." To be honest, even I was a little surprised. This was the truth. After all, the power of Naz's Dragon Slayer magic was really extraordinary. Even though Naz was still young and hadn't displayed its true power, its power was still so great that even ordinary magic shooters could only look up to it. However, the Dragon Slayer magic was a magic used to fight against dragons, so it was not surprising that it had this kind of power. But what Noah didn't expect was that Wendy's Dragon Slayer magic didn't have the great power of Naz's Dragon Slayer magic. Instead, it had the ability to assist and heal. According to Wendy herself, it was because Wendy herself wasn't good at fighting. Therefore, in the skies, Dragon Slayer magic, she mastered the auxiliary magic faster. On the contrary, she didn't even master the slightest bit of combat magic. It was not as destructive as Naz's. In other words, compared to Naz's Fire Dragon Slayer magic, that was purely used for fighting, Wendy's Sky Dragon Slayer magic could not only be used for fighting, but also could be used to assist in fighting and heal injuries through various effects. It was a very rare all-around magic. If Wendy was a little older, perhaps this boy named Jalal wouldn't have been unconscious for the whole night. He would have been able to wake up under Wendy's treatment last night. Of course, without Wendy's treatment, Jalal might not have been able to wake up now. Hearing Noah's explanation, Jalal himself looked at Wendy with some surprise, which made Wendy feel embarrassed. She buried her face in Noah's arms and didn't dare to look up. Seeing this, the little vigilance in Jalal's heart disappeared, and he sincerely thanked Wendy. "Thank you for saving me. I just helped a little," Wendy said shyly. "It was Brother Noah who carried you here. You should thank Brother Noah." "No need to thank me." Noah shook his head and looked straight at Jalal. "But if you can tell me the reason why there was such a strange change in the sky last night, I will be very grateful." "You?" Jalal's eyes narrowed. "You saw it all?" "I was in the forest. It's impossible that I didn't see such a change in the sky, right? Noah said with a smile. And you don't look like someone who doesn't know about it. So, can you tell me what it was? That's. Jalal's face darkened, and his voice became heavy. That was super subspace magic anima. Anima? Wendy tilted her head, a question mark appearing above her head. Super subspace magic? Noah frowned. What the hell is going on? Jalal lowered his head even more, and there was a look of struggle in his eyes. I'm sorry I can't tell you the details, so please don't ask anymore. Noah's frown deepened as he looked at Jalal's somewhat evasive and struggling eyes. After a while, his tightly knitted brows relaxed and he began to speak. As I said earlier, I am a magic shooter from Fairy Tale. This time I came here because of a request from a nearby village. They said that in this forest, there is a wailing spirit that can cast a curse that can shatter the sky. And I am here to solve this inconceivable matter. Jalal and Wendy were both stunned. However, Jalal realized something from Noah's evasive words, and finally smiled. You don't have to worry about that. Anima has indeed been triggered many times here, but I stopped it. The one last night should be the last time it was triggered. After this, Anima won't be triggered here again. As for the crying ghost, I don't know. I have solved the crying ghost. Noah didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he glanced at Wendy, who had a confused look on her face beside him. It is indeed a crying ghost and it is quite cute. Now Noah finally understood the whole story. If he wasn't wrong, the crying ghost that the village chief mentioned was only the cry that Wendy made when she was looking for Grandine in the forest. As for why the sky would be cursed and split apart when the specter cried, that was purely because of the super secondary space magic, anima, which no one knew what it was. In other words, Wendy's crying and the activation of anima happened to coincide, which caused the villagers hunting in the forest to panic, leading to the incident of the crying ghost cursing the sky. Everything was caused by a coincidence and a misunderstanding. This made Noah couldn't help but find it funny, and he couldn't help but feel a myriad of emotions. Sure enough, ghosts and whatnot didn't exist. Wendy, who didn't know, had a head full of question marks. Jalal, on the other hand, seemed to understand, and he also smiled helplessly. Since the truth has been revealed, and there won't be any more crying ghosts or anima in the future, my commission can be considered completed. The rest is none of my business, and I won't ask again. Noah stood up and skillfully reached out his hand to hold Wendy's hand, which was about to reach out in a hurry. Now I'm going back to the village. Do you want to come with me? Jalal looked at Noah gratefully, nodded and stood up. The three of them walked out of the cave together, and walked out of the forest. Chapter 33. The moderate temperature of the sun shone on the neither too large nor too small village. It also shone on the courtyard of an old hotel, covering a man and a woman in the courtyard with a layer of golden gauze. Ha! 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 Along with the loud and clear shouts, Noah held the night sword in his hand and slashed with the standard posture that he had practiced diligently for 3 months. Every slash created a flash of sword light and a sharp piercing sound in front of him, giving off a pleasing feeling to the eyes. Not far away, Wendy sat on the doorstep, her small hands supporting her cheeks. Her big watery eyes were fixed on Noah, who was waving his sword in the courtyard. She had a satisfied expression on her face, and her eyes never left Noah. This was the 3rd day after Noah, Wendy, and Jalal returned from the forest. On the first day back, Noah went to the village chief's house and told him that he had completed the mission. He asked the village chief to tell the villagers to go back to the forest to hunt as usual. The village chief naturally thanked Noah for his words, and tactfully asked Noah to stay in the village for a few days. When the villagers who went into the forest confirmed that there were no more weeping ghosts and broken skies in the forest, they would pay him for completing the mission. This was a matter of course. Noah did not think that he could gain the village chief's trust with just a few words, so he took Wendy and stayed in the village's hotel. As for Jalal, Noah originally thought that he would leave directly, but in the end, Jalal also stayed and temporarily stayed in the village. Although according to my inference, anima should not be activated in this area anymore, but to be safe, it's better to stay and observe for a while. Just like this, Noah, Wendy, and Jalal stayed in the village together, and also stayed in the hotel. It was worth mentioning that although the three of them stayed in the same hotel in the village, they only stayed in 2 rooms. Noah was the first person that Wendy met in her life. Now, Wendy's mother, Grandine, had suddenly disappeared. Wendy had bitterly searched for her in the forest for several days, crying for several days. It was easy to imagine how difficult it was for a little girl who was less than 10 years old and didn't know how to deal with worldly affairs. Perhaps because of this, as the first person that Wendy met and the first person who gave her warmth, Noah seemed to have a very high position in Wendy's heart in just 3 days. In addition, Wendy's only family member was missing. So in these 3 days, Wendy basically did not leave Noah for a moment. She even had to sleep in the same room and bed as Noah, otherwise she would have a sad expression as if she wanted to cry. She was completely attached to Noah. Unable to do anything, Noah could only let Wendy do as she pleased. Ha 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 ha. Rhythmic shouts sounded continuously, and the cold gleam of the blade flickered continuously in the courtyard. In these 3 days, Noah basically used all of his time to train his sword skills and control of mana. Compared to Magnolia, there were not many changes apart from the different location and the absence of Alusha as a sparring partner. Even outside, Noah did not forget to train himself. That was the only battle ability that he had at the moment. On the other hand, Wendy, who had been watching Noah practice his swordsmanship, caught a glimpse of someone approaching. After being stunned for a moment, she stood up and called out to Noah in a delicate voice. "Big brother Noah. Jalal is back." The knight's sword in Noah's hand that had just swung down paused in midair, and did not follow the momentum of the attack. From this, it could be seen that Noah's sword skills had improved by leaps and bounds. Even Alusha would praise him if she saw this scene. Big brother Noah. It was unknown when Wendy had run to Noah's side. She held a towel in her hand and handed it to Noah. "Thank you." Noah took the towel, wiped his sweat and patted Wendy's head. When Wendy showed a comfortable expression, he turned his head and looked at Jalal, who was walking over. "How is it?" "It's still stable." Jalal nodded. "There are no signs of anima continuing to activate in this place. I think it's safe here." Hearing this, Noah nodded. Even though they had been together for 3 days, Jalal still didn't show any signs of telling Noah about the super subspace magic, anima. Therefore, Noah didn't know anything about anima either. However, from Jalal's words of "it's safe here," it could be inferred that if anima was successfully activated, it would definitely lead to a disaster not inferior to Noah's mana rampage. It was to prevent this disaster that Jalal appeared here. According to Jalal, he would continue to wander around the world, searching for the traces of anima, embarking on the journey of constantly closing anima that was about to be activated. Knowing this, Noah cast his gaze on Jalal. "Are you planning to leave?" Jalal opened his mouth and was about to say something, but a voice interrupted him. A guest from Fairy Tale. The newcomer was none other than the owner of the hotel, who had walked in from outside and stood in front of Noah. Noah looked at the owner of the hotel, looking at his hesitant look, frowned slightly and asked, "What's wrong? Did something happen?" "The village chief asked me to bring a message to you." The owner of the hotel shook his head and said, "Not long ago, there were 3 white-haired children about your age who went to the village chief to ask about your whereabouts. Then they went into the forest and have not returned since. The village chief asked me to ask you, are those 3 your companions?" 3 white-haired children? Wendy and Jalal both looked at Noah at the same time, so they also clearly saw the sudden change in Noah's expression. "What's wrong?" Jalal asked. "Are they people you know?" "Kind of." Noah's expression was not good, and he asked the owner of the hotel, "You're saying that the 3 of them never came back after they entered the forest?" "No, they just never came back," the owner of the hotel answered honestly. The villagers only saw the 3 people enter the forest, but they never saw them come out. Noah was silent for a moment, then nodded. "I understand, please thank the village chief for me." The owner of the hotel nodded with a smile and left. "Brother Noah." Wendy suddenly felt a little uneasy, and tightly held the silent Noah's hand, not letting go. "Noah," Jalal asked, "do you need help?" Noah's expression changed a few times, and he finally sighed and pulled Wendy in front of him. "If you want to help me, could you please take Wendy to Grandine?" "Take Wendy to Grandine?" Jalal was a little surprised. "I don't want to." Wendy's little face turned pale, and she suddenly hugged Noah's leg. I don't want to leave Brother Noah. Noah seemed to have expected things to turn out this way. He smiled helplessly and squatted down to pull Wendy in front of him again. Wendy, be good, and let Jalal take you to Grandini, okay? I don't want to. Wendy threw herself into Noah's arms again and hugged Noah tightly, as if she would rather die than let go. Brother Noah, don't be like Grandini and leave me alone. Hearing Wendy's words and feeling how hard Wendy was hugging him with her tiny arms, Noah was shocked. Although Noah liked Wendy, who was like a little sister to him, he really didn't expect her to be so attached to him. Thinking of this, Noah couldn't help but feel a little troubled. He stroked Wendy's thin back and said softly, I don't want to separate from Grandini. I don't want to be separated from Wendy either, but don't you want to look for Grandini? Wendy trembled. Chapter 34. Did she want to find Grandini? Wasn't the answer obvious? Although Grandini was a dragon, she had raised Wendy like a mother. She was the most important person to Wendy apart from Noah. Noah had indeed helped Wendy when she was at her most helpless. He occupied a very important position in Wendy's heart, so much so that she almost couldn't leave him. But if Wendy was asked if she wanted to find Grandini, of course she wanted to, didn't she? However, Wendy didn't want to leave Noah either. Even if it was only 3 days, Noah was still very important to Wendy. If Wendy had a choice, she definitely wouldn't want to leave Noah. Otherwise, she wouldn't have stuck to Noah for 3 days. I want to find Grandini. Wendy's delicate body began to tremble in Noah's arms. Even her voice trembled. It was obvious that her emotions were fluctuating greatly. But, I don't want to leave Big Brother Noah either. Leaving is only temporary. I won't suddenly disappear like Grandini. If Wendy wants to find me, it'll be very easy. Noah could clearly feel Wendy's heart wavering. He patted her back comfortingly and sighed. I'm a sorcerer in fairy tale, and I'm not old enough to take charge of a guild yet. I can't accompany you all over the world to find Grandini. Originally, I wanted to bring you back to fairy tale and see if my companions in the guild could help. But now Jalal wants to go all over the world to stop the activation of anima, and you have to go all over the world to find Grandini. Although your goals are different, the process is exactly the same. Noah glanced at the silent Jalal and smiled faintly. If that's the case, why don't you let Jalal help you find Grandini? Isn't that good? Wendy buried her little face in Noah's arms. She didn't say a word, but her delicate body kept trembling. It was obvious that she was still wavering. Is that okay? Jalal asked with a hint of worry. Although what you said is not unreasonable, if we really encounter anima on the journey, it'll be too dangerous for Wendy to follow me. So, to be honest, I don't agree. I believe you can take good care of Wendy. Noah met Jalal's gaze and stared at him closely. Can you promise me that no matter what the situation is, you'll ensure Wendy's safety? Looking at Noah's eyes that were as deep as the stars, Jalal felt a strong sense of responsibility. He took a deep breath and nodded firmly. I promise, no matter what, I will ensure Wendy's safety. Noah smiled freely and pulled Wendy away from his arms. He watched as she lowered her head, and her expression could not be seen clearly. Then he patted her head. If you really don't want to, I won't force you. Come with me to fairy tale. I'll definitely help you find Grandini. Wendy bit her lips. Her eyes were still filled with hesitation. To be honest, Wendy really didn't want to leave Noah. She was very tempted by Noah's suggestion. However, Wendy asked herself, was this really okay? Wendy believed that if she asked Noah for help, Noah would definitely do his best to help her find Grandini. However, it was because she trusted Noah so much and cared so much about him that Wendy didn't want to cause trouble for Noah. Wendy raised her head. First, she looked at Noah, who had a gentle smile on his face. Then she looked at Jalal beside her. Finally, she fixed her gaze on the fairy tale emblem on the back of Noah's hand. Wendy reached out and held Noah's hand that had the fairy tale emblem on it. After looking at the emblem for a while, she met Noah's gaze. Big Brother Noah, will we meet again? When she said this, Wendy's eyes were filled with reluctance and determination. Noah, who clearly saw all of this, smiled knowingly. Fairy Tale is the most famous guild in the Fiori Kingdom. I believe that even in the future, the name of fairy tale will spread across the entire continent. There won't be a single person who doesn't know how to get to fairy tale. Noah touched Wendy's soft cheeks and said this with an unbelievably warm tone. If you miss me, come find me at Fairy's Tale. This time Wendy smiled. Her smile was unusually happy. I'll always miss you, big brother Noah. I believe that Grandini will also like you. You're both my favorite people. Wendy threw herself into Noah's arms and hugged Noah tightly again. However, this time, Wendy's strength was less sorrowful and more sentimental. Hugging Wendy's small body, Noah raised his head and said solemnly to Jalal, I'll leave Wendy to you. Jalal nodded, and the emotion in his eyes was sincere. I'll do my best. In the forest under the sun, the roars of beasts echoed everywhere, adding a dangerous atmosphere to the hot air. Noah, who was carrying a long cloth bag in one hand and slinging it over his left shoulder, was running in the forest at an extremely fast speed. He was like a cheetah that was dashing wildly in the forest. His speed was so fast that one could only see an afterimage as he nimbly dodged the trees that blocked his path. It was very astonishing. Even under such circumstances, Noah still diverted some of his attention to observe his surroundings and carefully listen to the sounds around him. He didn't miss any signs of movement. According to the villagers who were hunting in the forest, they once saw Mila, Elfman, and Lisanna noisily passing by as if they were looking for something. In other words, it was very likely that the Strauss siblings were still wandering around this area. Noah couldn't help but curse in his heart. Noah thought that the Strauss siblings had already known that he had completed the mission and had given up and left in the past 3 days. He didn't expect them to still be in the forest. It seemed that they hadn't given up on snatching the mission from Noah. Needless to say, the Strauss siblings hadn't gone out since they entered the forest 3 days ago. Otherwise, it was impossible for them to not know that the village chief had issued a notice in the village to allow the villagers to continue hunting in the forest. Aren't those siblings a little too stubborn? Noah more or less gnashed his teeth, but he didn't slow down in the slightest. Logically speaking, even if the Strauss siblings were still wandering around the forest, Noah didn't have to personally search for them, nor did he have to be in such a hurry to find them. But for some reason, Noah had a bad feeling in his heart. They wouldn't have encountered any danger, would they? There shouldn't be any magical creatures in the forest, so naturally, there shouldn't be any danger. But that wasn't for certain. Perhaps there was some magical creature that wasn't too weak, and the Strauss siblings couldn't deal with it. Noah could sense a rather strong mana from Mira, but Elfman and Lisanna didn't have any mana fluctuations at all. It was obvious that they hadn't started learning magic yet. It was hard to guarantee that there wouldn't be any accidents. Most importantly, Noah believed in his premonition. If I find you guys, I'll definitely teach you a lesson. With such determination, Noah increased his speed. Roar! At this moment, a loud roar resounded from not far away. This voice. Noah stopped abruptly, his expression changing. I can't be that unlucky, right? As he said that, Noah leaped and rushed in the direction of the voice. Chapter 35. Roar. When Noah heard that loud roar once more, the owner of the roar finally entered Noah's eyes. Noah, who was charging forward at an extremely fast speed, clearly saw a 3-meter-tall giant with the head of a cow and the body of a human. It walked upright, holding a thick tree trunk in one hand and a screaming child in the other as it raised its head and roared. In front of the giant, there was a white-haired man and a woman. One of them was sitting on the ground, his face filled with horror, while the other was standing there, facing the giant with an anxious look on her face. The child who was being held by the giant and screaming was Lisanna. The one sitting on the ground with a face full of horror was Elfman. The one facing the giant was Mira, who was gnashing her teeth anxiously. As for the giant, it was an existence Noah was very familiar with. It was a very famous and ferocious demonic creature that had no rationality at all. In the forest of Magnoria, Noah had encountered these ferocious monsters more than once under the leadership of some sorcerers from the fairy's tale. Those were monsters that even ordinary sorcerers were extremely afraid of. Why would such a monster appear in a forest with only ferocious beasts? This was a question that Noah had no way of finding out the answer to, and he wasn't interested in finding out either. Roar! Sister Mira! Lisanna! The giant's roar, Lisanna's scream, and Myra's sorrowful cry rang out at almost the same time. causing Noah's starry eyes to slowly shrink as he increased his speed to the maximum. But even so, it would still take some time for Noah to reach the Strauss siblings and the gigantic bull-like figure. During this time, as long as the giant tightened its grip on Lasana's hand, the cute little girl would be crushed to pieces and die tragically on the spot. There was no time. It was too late. Noah's heart began to beat faster. Without hesitation, he grabbed the cloth bag slung over his shoulder and pulled with force. In the next moment, the hilt of Noah's night sword poked out of the bag and was tightly grasped by Noah. However, Noah didn't immediately pull out the sword. Instead, he activated the vast amount of mana in his body and channeled it into the night sword through his hand. Wang! The night sword that had yet to be unsheathed shook in the scabbard and released a dense light. Clang! Mira, who was about to disregard her own life and risk her life to save Lysana, didn't have time to act. The sound of a sword instantly filled every corner of the scene and turned into an echo that reverberated in the forest. Mira, who was confronting the giant, Lysana, who was being held by the giant, and Elfman, who was limply lying on the ground, all three saw it. A streak of light suddenly shot out from a corner of the forest like a comet, flashing with dazzling light. The streak of light appeared out of nowhere and flashed past at a speed that made one's eyes blur. Amidst the sound of the air vibrating and exploding, it was like a meteor that fell from the sky and viciously crashed into the giant. An extremely clear tearing sound reverberated in the air. What followed was a rain of blood that crazily sprinkled down like rain. The gigantic minotaur didn't even have the time to let out a blood-curdling screech. His 3-meter-tall body was torn open with his waist as the center. The upper and lower halves of the gigantic minotaur were completely separated from each other. The giant bull was cut into 2 halves. Whoosh! Scarlet blood sprinkled down from the sky and turned the scene into a pool of blood. Boom! The giant's upper and lower halves heavily smashed into the ground. Not only did blood splatter everywhere, but there was also a huge sound that caused the ground to tremble slightly. Mira and Elfman stood up in a daze, while Elfman's face was completely filled with fear as he screamed out loud. There was no helping it. The scene before them was simply too bloody. Looking at the blood-red ground in front of him and the huge Tauren who was sliced into 2 halves, Elfman was still screaming in agony. Mira was the first to react. Lysana! As soon as she said that, another calm voice sounded from the other side. Over here! Mira hurriedly looked over when she heard that voice. On the other side of the giant that was sliced in half, Noah carried the unconscious Lysana in one hand and held a night sword that was as dazzling as ice in the other. He looked at the giant that was sliced in half with a grim expression. Did I use too much strength? Mira finally understood. The person who sliced the giant in half was the same age as her, the youth that she looked down on. Moreover, he used a knight's sword that was more majestic than power. Although she didn't own one, it didn't mean that she hadn't heard of it before. In this world, there were many things that had all sorts of strange abilities and effects. Some were even equivalent to magical weapons. Some called them magic-conducting weapons, while others called them magical weapons. They were truly precious tools. The common point of these magical weapons was that they required the user to provide them with magical energy in order to activate their abilities and effects. The knight's sword in Noah's hand was flowing with magical energy. There was no need to guess that it could only be a magical weapon. The scene of the giant being sliced in half was still replaying in Mira and Elfman's minds. The siblings froze on the spot and couldn't say a word for a long time. On the other side, Noah had the same reaction. Of course, Noah didn't use too much magical energy in a moment of desperation, resulting in him using too much strength and cutting the giant in half. It was because he noticed Mira that he became like this. Noah stared at one of Myra's hands, and a solemn expression gradually appeared on his face. There was no other reason. It was because Myra's hand didn't look like a human's arm. Instead, it looked like the hand of a ferocious beast or a magical beast. It was ferocious and terrifying, and there was a dark aura that made Noah's heart palpitate. It was like the arm of a demon. Feeling Noah's gaze, Myra's expression changed. She seemed to remember her current appearance and couldn't help but hide her demon-like arm behind her back. Her delicate face turned ugly. The whole place was silent. This was the cave that Noah, Wendy, and Jalal stayed in 3 days ago. Now, Wendy and Jalal were gone, But the number of people in the cave had increased instead of decreasing. Lysana had already woken up. She stayed with Elfman around the bonfire that Noah had lit. Looking in the direction of Noah and Mira, her face was full of worry and sadness. Noah and Mira were leaning against the wall on both sides of the cave in silence, as if they had deliberately distanced themselves from each other, keeping the furthest distance from each other. Noah had already sheathed his knight's sword and put it back into his pouch. He leaned against the wall and continued to stare at Mira with a thoughtful expression. Mira, on the other hand, was acting differently. She was different from the domineering aura she had when they first met 3 or 4 days ago. Now she was wearing a cloak and her body was exposed to the air. Only her demon-like arm was hidden behind the cloak. She didn't take it out and her face was dark. As such, the atmosphere in the cave became more and more oppressive. It was so oppressive that Lysana and Elfman almost couldn't breathe. Thus, Noah took the initiative to break the oppressive atmosphere. It's about time you tell me what's going on, right? Chapter 36. It's about time you tell me what's going on, right? Noah's words echoed clearly in the small cave, causing the atmosphere to turn from stifling to heavy. Noah had only thought of his encounter with the Strauss siblings as a chance encounter. Even though he was curious as to why they wanted to steal his job, he didn't intend to get too close to them. But now, Noah realized that he could no longer treat the 3 of them as passers-by. Not because of anything else, but because of the gloominess, sadness, and other emotions on the faces of the 3 Strauss siblings. Big brother Noah. At the side, Lysana wanted to say something with an anxious expression, but she only had time to call out to Noah before she was interrupted by Mira, who coldly opened her mouth. Lysana. Lysana immediately shut her mouth, her anxious expression turning into sadness and even a hint of sorrow. Even Elfman had the same expression. Mira was the only one who no longer looked like a bad girl. Instead, she was as cold as ice. Seeing this, although Noah didn't know what the Strauss siblings were hiding, he understood what they were trying to do. Even though they were still young, Mira, Elfman, and Lysana, like Alusa, had painful pasts that they couldn't bear to look back on. Sigh. Noah sighed. His voice was soft, but it echoed in the silent cave and entered the ears of Mira, Elfman, and Lysana. Even though I don't know what you're hiding, Noah said as he looked at Mira's hand hidden behind the cloak. But I think it has something to do with that hand of yours, right? Mira didn't say anything. Instead, she hid her face under the hood of her cloak, hiding her expression. Noah, Elfman said hesitantly as he struggled to speak. Aren't you afraid of my sister? Big brother Elfman. Lysana tugged at Elfman's clothes as if she was blaming him for saying such a thing. However, she also looked at Noah with pleading eyes. Plead for what? Begging them not to be afraid of their elder sister? Noah frowned deeply as a thought flashed through his mind. Don't you know why your sister's hand became like that? This time Elfman, Lysana, and even the silent Mira raised their heads. After being stunned for a moment, their faces lit up. Big brother Noah. Lysana didn't care about anything else. She ran directly to Noah's side and held his hand tightly. Her face was anxious, but there was also a trace of hope. Do you know why Sister Myra's hand became like that? That's not quite right. Noah's furrowed brows slowly relaxed as he looked at Mira. Myra's gaze happened to meet his. Only you know what your sister went through to become like that. However, it seems like you only know a part of it. A part. Mira, Elfman, and Lysana muttered at the same time. I don't like to know other people's secrets and the things they don't like to talk about. Looking at the 3 Strauss siblings, Noah seemed to have guessed something and chuckled. However, if you're willing to share with me, I think I can be a good listener, secret protector, and solver. The 3 Strauss siblings fell silent. Big sister Mira. Elfman and Lysana both turned to look at their big sister, hesitating to speak. Seeing this, Mira lowered her head and didn't say anything. It was only when the siblings were getting impatient that she began to speak in a low voice. There was a very powerful demon in the church in the village we used to live in. Because he caused the villagers to feel fear and despair, I wanted to see if I could destroy him, so I approached the church. Sister Mira was possessed by a demon in order to destroy the demon that brought harm to the village. Perhaps she could hear the emotions in her sister's voice, so she bit her lip and said loudly, However, everyone in the village regarded my sister, who had destroyed the demon, as a demon and drove us out of the village. Sister didn't do anything wrong at all. Elfman, who was slightly timid, said indignantly. Undoubtedly she destroyed the demon, but everyone treated her like that. Everyone is too much. Enough, Elfman. Myra's emotionless voice sounded once more. It's useless to say anything now. We can't return to the village anymore. Elfman and Lysanna looked dispirited, and Noah more or less understood what was going on. Noah placed the pouch containing the knight's sword on the wall and stood up. Under the gaze of the three siblings, he squatted in front of Mira and extended his hand. Give me your hand. Mira frowned. Just as she was about to turn away and ignore Noah, she heard Noah raise his voice. Give me your hand. The slightly unyielding and indescribably calm voice made Mira recall the scene of the giant being cut in half in the forest. Her eyes trembled slightly, and she couldn't help but extend her hand. Apart from the night he met Wendy, this was the second time Noah had touched the hand of a member of the opposite sex. However, compared to Wendy's cold and tender hand, Myra's hand only gave Noah one feeling. It was coarse, but it couldn't be helped. After all, it wasn't Myra's original hand. He didn't know if it was a crocodile, lizard, or both, but Myra's hand was covered in scales. Her fingers were sharp like the claws of a malicious spirit, and the shape was also abnormally sinister. Coupled with the faint aura of darkness emanating from it, there was no normal person who wouldn't be afraid of such a hand. To plant such a hand on a girl who was adorable in all aspects was not only unworthy, but also extremely cruel. Even Mira wanted to withdraw her hand after regaining her senses. However, Noah held her hand tightly and stroked the sinister scales without a hint of disdain. His actions were abnormally gentle, and Myra's heart, which was shrouded by the trauma of what happened to her, relaxed. Her movements also slowed down. Noah first touched the scales on Myra's hand, using his outstanding sensing ability to sense the dark aura on them. It wasn't until he sensed traces of Myra's mana from the aura that he was finally able to confirm his guess. First of all, I have to tell you that your hand didn't become like this because you were possessed by a demon. This sentence made the hearts of the three Strauss siblings tremble. Really? Lysanna couldn't help but stand up and ask with some excitement. In other words, Sister Mira didn't become like this because she was possessed by a demon, right? Then why did Sister's hand become like this? Elfman hurriedly asked. Do you have a way to help Sister's hand return to its original state? Mira was also staring at Noah. Her eyes were filled with hope and fear at the same time. Help your sister return to its original state? This time it was Noah's turn to be confused. He looked at Elfman in puzzlement. Is there no way to return this hand to its original state? But when I met you in the inn, wasn't your sister's hand normal? That's the effect of a magic tool, Lysanna explained. It's a magic tool that can confuse people's vision. We obtained that tool by chance, but it can only be used once. When we were attacked by that magical creature, Sister Mira removed the tool's effect in order to protect us. Now we can't use it anymore. Chapter 37. The effect of a magical item? Noah nodded and looked at Mira. In other words, you have no way of controlling your own magic? Magic? Mira, Elfman, and Lysanna were stunned. Although I've never seen it before, I've read about it in books. Noah explained slowly as he continued to stroke Myra's sinister arm. In the magic world, there is a kind of magic that can be used to receive the power of animals, monsters, or even magical creatures. It can transform one's own physique into the physique of animals, monsters, or magical creatures. It can reproduce the power of animals, monsters, or magical creatures in one's own body. It is called receiving magic. You're not possessed by a demon. Noah met Myra's gaze. You must have accidentally received the power of the evil demons in the church of your village, and thus awakened the receiving magic. Awakened. Bewilderment was written all over the faces of the Strauss siblings. If a human wants to learn magic, there are two ways. Noah nodded. One is to learn the magic that one likes through independent learning, and thus become a magic shooter who can use that magic. The other is through independent awakening. Everything in the world has a type of chi called magic, flowing through their bodies. That's what determines whether a person can use magic or not. Noah explained patiently. And in every person's body, there's a type of magic that can best reflect them. There's a certain chance of self-awakening under certain circumstances. In Myra's case, she should have awakened receiving magic on her own when she came into contact with a demon from the church and obtained the demon's power. That's why she became like this. Elfman and Lysana didn't know much, but they knew that their sister wasn't really possessed by a demon. Although they didn't say anything, their faces were brimming with excitement. As for Mira, her eyes dimmed even more. Demon's power, Mira said mockingly as she looked at her sinister arm that resembled a demon's. This kind of power? I don't need it. The cave that had more or less regained some liveliness immediately fell into a strange silence. The atmosphere was once again oppressive. Noah narrowed his eyes and smiled indifferently. Why, isn't it a good thing to have power? A good thing. Mira tightened her grip on Noah's hand, a trace of hatred appearing in her eyes. Because of this power, I'm no longer human. How is that a good thing? Sister Mira. Elfman and Lysana both had pained expressions on their faces. Being chased out of the village with Mira, and then wandering around with Mira without a fixed place to stay, one could imagine the hardships and pain they had gone through. Elfman and Lysana were very clear how difficult it was for Mira. After all, the reason why she had such painful memories was because she had obtained the demon's power. Under such circumstances, how could Mira not be disgusted with herself for having such power? That was why, even though she knew that she wasn't possessed by a demon, she still couldn't let it go. Elfman and Lysana didn't know what to say about that. They could only worry in their hearts. Not human? Noah gazed at Mira as though he could see through all her thoughts. After a while, he released his hand that was stroking Myra's ferocious demon arm. So according to what you're saying, everyone who can use magic is no longer human? Mira did not notice that Noah's gaze, which was enough to see through people's hearts, was on her body. Her delicate face was filled with extreme sarcasm. That's not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant. Before Mira could finish her sarcastic words, Noah's sudden words mercilessly shut her up. At least in my opinion, you don't have any reason to hate yourself for having power, nor do you have any reason to resent the power you have. You're just deceiving yourself, throwing a tantrum, and being willful. What? What did you say? As expected, Myra's expression changed because of Noah's merciless words. The negative emotions that had accumulated in her heart for a long time were all detonated by Noah's words. You don't know anything at all. What right do you have to say that? Sister Mira. Seeing Myra's angry expression, Elfman and Lysana were shocked. They seemed to want to go up and comfort her, but they were stopped by Noah. You're the one who doesn't know anything. Noah looked at Mira with an intense gaze. If I were you, I wouldn't hate this power. Instead, I'd be grateful for it. Otherwise, you wouldn't even have the right to protect your family in front of that giant magical creature. The anger on Myra's face froze in an instant. I don't know what kind of cruel treatment you received in your village. I also don't know how difficult your life was after you left the village, Noah said calmly. But I know what it feels like to hate your own power. At this point, Noah couldn't help but recall the time when he was first adopted by Makarov and joined Fairy's Tale. Although our experiences are different, I'm similar to you. There's a powerful force in my body that I can't control. This force almost brought unimaginable disaster to my family and friends more than once. So one day I suddenly thought, why do I have to have this kind of power? Wouldn't it be great if I didn't hate this extra power? Noah looked directly at the stunned Mira. However, just as I was thinking about it, my grandfather said that there's nothing wrong with having power, and there's no reason for people to hate people who have power. However, if you use your power in a way that makes people hate you, that's the real mistake. Since that day, I've never hated the fact that I have power, because I'll never use my power for something that people hate. Noah stood up, ignoring the gazes of the Strauss siblings behind him, and walked to the cloth bag he put on the wall. Receive magic is magic that can receive the power of animals, monsters, and magical creatures for your own use. But I've never heard of anyone's receive magic that can even receive the power of demons. This is enough to prove that you have a special talent, and you'll definitely have extraordinary power in the future. How to use this power, you should think about it carefully, and not blindly deny it. Of course, you can also choose not to use this power. After all, it's magic. If you can learn it, you can abandon it. But if you do this, I hope you won't regret it when you need power. Picking up the cloth bag on the wall, Noah sat down and closed his eyes. I just want to say, cherish this power. It can protect your family for you. After saying that, Noah did not speak again. He closed his eyes as if he had fallen asleep, and the cave returned to silence once more. Seeing Noah leaning against the wall and resting with his eyes closed, Mira clenched her demon arm tightly, her eyes filled with the strongest of emotions. Sister Mira. Elfman and Lysanna looked at their sister worriedly and came to her side. Mira was completely unaware of it, and looked absent-mindedly at Noah, who was resting with his eyes closed. Her heart could not calm down for a long time. Even so, time still flowed on its own, and the activity of the world did not stop at all because of this. Even if something extraordinary happened in that small cave, night still fell, announcing the end of the day. However, for Mira, Elfman, and Lysanna, the night would definitely not be ordinary, but it would also be difficult to endure. Chapter 38. This is delicious. Brother Elfman, don't eat so fast. But it's really delicious. Really? Water. Water. Seeing Elfman choking and Lysanna panicking, Noah couldn't help but facepalm. At daybreak, Noah, the Strauss siblings returned to the nearby village and returned to the inn. A day later, Wendy had left the village with Jalal and embarked on a journey to find Grandine and stop the activation of anima. After 3 to 4 days of living in the wild, the Strauss siblings finally returned to a place with people. However, what surprised Noah was that the Strauss siblings didn't have the money to stay in the inn, nor did they have the money to eat. That was to be expected. Before the Strauss siblings were driven out of the village, they weren't rich. The three of them depended on each other for survival. During this period of time, they had already spent all the money they had brought out from home. It was precisely because of this that when the Strauss siblings heard that the village had issued a commission to expel the ghosts in the nearby forest, they gave the magical item to Mira to use to hide the demon's arm and came to the village to accept the commission to earn some living expenses and travel expenses. Who would have thought that when the Strauss siblings were ready, they would come to the village and find the village chief, only to be told by the village chief that someone had already accepted the job. Only then did the Strauss siblings come to the village to look for trouble and snatch the job. It was no wonder that the Strauss siblings were so stubborn about the commission, to the point that they searched for Noah in the forest for 3 days and still weren't willing to return. If they couldn't snatch the commission, the Strauss siblings wouldn't even be able to afford a meal. That would be terrible. Of course, after knowing the beginning of the matter, Noah didn't know whether to laugh or cry. However, he didn't gossip because of this and simply ordered a table of dishes for the Strauss siblings, who had been eating wild game in the forest for several days, to have a good meal. After returning to the village chief sent someone to inform Noah that he had already acknowledged that Noah had completed the commission they issued, and gave him all the compensation of 200,000 J in one go. In addition to the 1 million J he had left behind for activating the ritual lake. While Noah didn't bring it all with him, treating others to a good meal wasn't a problem. He wouldn't be stingy to the point of leaving someone in the lurch. However, if possible, Noah still hoped that Elfman could restrain himself and eat a little quietly. Noah glanced at Mira, who was sitting at the side with a cloak covering her body. She was eating silently with only one hand stretched out, and Noah was not used to it. Last time you rushed over like a delinquent girl and threatened to snatch my job. This time you're so obedient. How unsettling. Mira continued to eat silently, seemingly not hearing Noah's muttering. On the other hand, Lysanna, who was sitting further away from Noah, heard a little. She secretly observed Mira, then moved closer to Noah's ear and said, "Actually, ever since she was possessed by a demon. No, since she received the power of a demon and awakened her magic. Sister Mira has never smiled or talked much. She was so rude last time because she wanted to appear strong in front of outsiders and protect us," Linley said. "Is that so?" Noah smiled and nodded without batting an eyelid. His words were not as secretive as Lysanna's. "I think demons definitely don't have such a delicate side. Only humans would change themselves for their family." Mira, who was eating, paused for a moment, then recovered and continued eating as if nothing had happened. Lysanna nodded gratefully at Noah, then turned her gaze to Elfman, who was wolfing down his food. Her expression immediately became angry, and she started arguing with Elfman. The entire meal basically went into Elfman's stomach. Only the sound of Elfman eating, Lysana's curious questioning of Noah, Noah's occasional conversation, and Myra's silence could be heard. Since you're full, what plans do you have for the future? Noah took a sip of his drink and looked at the Strauss siblings. You don't have any extra money, right? You can't go on like this, right? This. Lysana and Elfman looked at each other, and Myra's eyes flickered slightly. It was clear that the Strauss siblings didn't have any good plans at the moment. Noah tapped the table rhythmically, his gaze sweeping past Myra, Elfman and Lysana. After a while, the corner of his mouth curled up. How about it? Do you want to try Fairy Tale? Go to Fairy Tale? Not to mention Lysana and Elfman, even Myra was clearly moved for a moment. It had to be said that the Magic Guide Guild really was a good place for the Strauss siblings. Myra, Elfman and Lysana didn't have a fixed residence, and apart from each other, they had no one else to rely on. If they wanted to survive, they had to have a stable income. However, even if the Strauss siblings wanted to work and earn money, age was a huge issue. Ordinary jobs wouldn't consider hiring children at all. Otherwise, the Strauss siblings wouldn't have to suffer so much. The Magic Guide Guild, on the other hand, didn't care so much. As long as they were able to use magic and had a certain level of strength, they would be able to complete the corresponding tasks and receive remuneration. Moreover, the remuneration was much better than ordinary jobs. Myra was able to use receive magic and receive the power of a demon. Being able to face off against a huge monster showed that her strength was definitely not a problem. Joining the Magic Guide Guild definitely wouldn't be a problem. The problem was that Elfman and Lysana hadn't learned magic and were just ordinary children. In Fairy's Tale, there are many children of your age who are still learning magic. So even if you don't know magic, you can still learn it after joining the guild, Noah said as he spread his hands. I myself am a magic shooter from Fairy Tale. Personally, I feel that there won't be too much of a problem if you all join Fairy Tale. It's not a bad place to go. Of course, the decision is in your hands. I'm just giving you a suggestion. Elfman and Lysana hesitated. In the end, they looked at Myra and waited for her decision. Myra looked at Noah and coincidentally met Noah's half-smile. She couldn't help but recall the scene in the cave in the forest, when Noah gently stroked her disgusting arm. Her heartbeat quickened for no reason and she avoided Noah's gaze. Under such circumstances, the scene became strangely quiet. After who knew how long, Myra raised her head and took a deep breath. Let's go to Fairy's Tale. Elfman and Lysana looked at each other and said in unison, Sister Myra, where are we going? We'll go where you go. Myra's heart warmed and she revealed a rare smile. Seeing this, Noah smiled knowingly and had a good impression of the Strauss siblings. Even if there were painful memories that no one knew of, even if they were in an extremely difficult situation, the three siblings would never leave each other and rely on each other. They would never give up on each other, and there was never a moment when they didn't think of each other. The ties of family would definitely be with them for the rest of their lives. It would be the medicine that would allow them to escape their pain, their predicament, and their past. Noah believed in this. Chapter 39. In his days, Noah realized that he was in a very inconceivable place. This was a place that was as vast as the sky, but also as if he could reach out and touch the boundaries of space. It was as light as water, as elegant as floating in the clouds. It was a very wonderful place. The sky was white. The ground was white. Everything that appeared in front of Noah's eyes was white. A vast expanse of whiteness, but it gave Noah a warm feeling. That feeling was as if he had returned to his mother's body, and was in the amniotic fluid. It was very wonderful. Undoubtedly, there was nothing here, but Noah did not feel lonely, did not feel lost, did not feel cold in his heart, and instead felt warm. If this could not be called wonderful, then what could be called wonderful? However, in this vast expanse of whiteness, it was not that there was nothing. Other than Noah in this world, there were other wonderful existences. Feathers that fell from the sky, feathers that were suspended in bubbles that fell from the sky, feathers that were covered and shrouded in white halos that were suspended in bubbles that fell from the sky. If it was said that this world gave Noah a warm feeling as if he had returned to his mother's body, then these feathers that were falling from the sky, emitting a faint light, gave Noah another kind of warmth that was similar yet not quite the same. How should he describe it? If he had to give an example, then it would be like family. Yes, Noah could be sure that these unbelievable feathers in front of him seemed to be his family. Thus, looking at the feathers that were falling from the sky, suspended in bubbles, hovering in the air, emitting a white halo, Noah revealed a smile of joy from the bottom of his heart. However, in the next second, a brand new scene appeared in front of Noah's eyes, causing the smile on Noah's face to completely disappear. A new family descended from the sky. They were still the same feathers that were suspended in bubbles. However, these feathers not only lost their bright white halo, but also became fragmented, as if they had been broken, and did not have the vitality that they should have had. Following that, the feathers that had lost their vitality replaced the intact feathers and floated in front of Noah, gathered around Noah and floated back and forth. It looked as if they were asking for help. Brother Noah. Brother Noah. A sweet and tender familiar voice gently echoed in Noah's ears. At the same time, Noah also felt that his body was constantly being shaken. The sleepy Noah woke up from his dazed state. He slowly opened his eyes and stared blankly at the source of the voice. What entered Noah's eyes was an extremely cute little girl. She was around 11 or 12 years old and wore a cute red dress. She had short white hair that was as clean as snow, and although her face was small, it was very delicate and cute. It was not difficult to imagine the beauty that the owner of this face would have when she grew up. Facing such an incomparably cute face, Noah's eyes still did not focus, and he could only blankly mumble, "Lisanna. It's Lisanna." Brother Noah. Lisanna's pretty face had a worried expression. Just as Noah was about to wonder why she had such an expression, Lisanna reached out her hand and touched Noah's cheek, wetting her hand. Wait a minute, wetting? Only then did Noah realize that he did not know when, but tears had actually flowed out of his eyes, wetting his cheeks. Am crying? Brother Noah. Lisanna helped Noah wipe away the tears on his face as she spoke worriedly. Did you have that dream again? Hearing this, Noah could not help but smile helplessly. Yes, this was not the first time Noah had experienced the white dream in his sleep. Or rather, ever since Noah had gained his own consciousness, the first scene, dream and memory that Noah experienced was that white dream. Even meeting Makarov was after that dream. Since then, Noah would have that strange dream every once in a while, experiencing the warmth of the dream and the sadness of the dream's end. That was the kind of heartbreak and grief that would only be felt by those broken feathers in the dream. Thus, whenever Noah had that dream and woke up from it, the sadness would cause Noah to shed tears that he had never shed for anything else. Only Lisanna, who had overbearingly snatched Gray's job ever since she joined Fairy Tale, would know about this matter. She would wake Gray up every day. Apart from Lisanna, even Noah's grandfather Makarov didn't know about this, let alone Gray, who came to wake him up every day but never entered the room before Noah woke up. Even Lisanna had only discovered it when she snuck into Noah's room in the morning to play a prank on him while Noah was still asleep. Seeing the pained look in her beautiful eyes, Noah revealed a rather steady smile and patted her head. Why are you showing such an expression? Lisanna said in a somewhat awkward manner. Whenever I think of Big Brother Noah having such sad dreams, I feel uncomfortable. How many times have I told you that it's not a sad dream? It's just that the feeling it gives is very strange and inexplicable. It affects my emotions quite a bit. Noah smiled bitterly and crawled out of the blanket, sitting up and stretching. You're still young, why are you so emotional? It's because Big Brother Noah is too slow and doesn't understand a girl's heart. Lisanna puffed up her cheeks and pulled Noah up from the bed. Alright, Big Brother Noah, hurry up and get up. Almost everyone in the guild is here and you're still sleeping in. Yes, yes, yes. Noah couldn't do anything about the carefree Lisanna. He allowed her to look for clothes for him and rush him to wash up like a worried sister. Ever since she joined Fairy Tale and found out that she was living alone in the guild, she had become like a little sister who was always worried about her. At first, Noah wasn't used to it, but as time passed, he got used to it. Now, if she didn't wake him up in the morning, Noah would feel uncomfortable. From this point alone, it could be seen that she was quite successful. Naturally, she became one of the few people in Fairy Tale who had a good relationship with Noah. Noah could not help but mutter to himself as he watched Lisanna skillfully take out the clothes that she had just washed yesterday, and was going to wear today while humming a pleasant tune. Why does it seem like she's so happy every time she's busy in my room? Lise Anna, who was helping Noah choose clothes for the day, turned her head in confusion. Big brother Noah, did you say something just now? Looking at her humming a nice tune, Noah let out a long sigh. Nothing Fairy Tale was as noisy as ever. While chatting with her, Noah arrived at the familiar bar on the first floor. As soon as he went down the stairs, two shadows pounced on Noah. Noah! Noah sighed again as he listened to the passionate battle cry and watched the two black figures gradually approaching him. The moment the black figures pounced on him, he stretched out his hands and grabbed their heads one by one. Then he pulled them back to the center. Bang! With a loud collision sound, the two heads slammed into each other. After a moment of stiffness, they fell softly to the ground. One of the heads was cherry red while the other was black. Apart from Naz and Gray, who else could it be? Chapter 40. The moment the loud collision sounded, everyone in the guild turned their gazes in the direction of the sound. When they saw Naz and Gray lying on the ground with a bump on their heads and circles around their eyes, everyone immediately retracted their gazes as if nothing had happened and started talking to each other. It couldn't be helped. This kind of scene happened almost every day in the guild, and the sorcerers in the guild had long been used to it. Not to mention the sorcerers in the guild, even Noah himself was used to it. He just habitually sighed and greeted as if nothing had happened. Good morning. Good morning. The other members of the guild began to greet him one after another. Good morning. Noah and Lise Anna. In the crowd, three girls of the same age as Noah also came over. One of them was wearing a cold armor with a plain dress inside. Another one was wearing a revealing leather outfit like a delinquent girl. Another one was wearing a simple plaid dress with her long black hair tied into a ponytail. The one wearing the cold armor was naturally Alusha. The one wearing the revealing leather outfit was Mira. As for the one with the long black hair tied into a ponytail, she was called Kana. Kana Alberona was a person who joined Fairy Tale earlier than Noah, Alusha and even Gray. You really don't learn your lesson every day. Alusha put her hands on her waist and looked at Naz and Gray on the ground, criticizing them seriously. If you want to defeat Noah, you should at least be more prepared. Rushing up like this is just a sneak attack. Even if you win, it doesn't count as strength. Alusha. Naz's whole body trembled as he clutched the bump on his head with a teary look. Don't stop me, I must defeat Noah today. This way, I can prove that I am stronger than Gray. Who are you saying is stronger than me? Gray also clutched the bump on his head and curled his lips in disdain. The one who defeated Noah will definitely be me. It's impossible for a stinky flame like you to do that. But you were knocked down by Noah in an instant. Kana glanced at Gray, who was only wearing a pair of shorts, and said in distress. Also Gray, where are your clothes? Oh no. Gray was shocked. By the way, Noah, did you ask Lise Anna to wake you up again? Mira couldn't help but feel annoyed when she saw the smiling Lise Anna hiding beside Noah. Don't order my sister around like a servant. It's just Noah. First of all, I didn't ask her to wake me up. She came on her own accord. Noah rubbed his aching glabella. Secondly, Mira, what's up with that insignificant Noah? Noah is very strong. Alusha retorted. Mira, are you insulting Noah? Tisk. Mira crossed her arms and said disdainfully. What does it have to do with you? What a tough woman. Alusha's forehead was instantly imprinted with the word, well. She looked at Mira with a fake smile. Are you insulting me? A woman who shows her belly button. You want to fight? Mira laughed nastily and raised her fingers. Just in time. Today I must teach you a lesson, you ice-cold guy. Oh. Alusha's face was filled with murderous intent. If you think you can do it, then come and try. Suddenly, the two girls' gazes seemed to have turned into solid electricity and collided fiercely. Their bodies emitted a demonic aura that sent chills down one's spine. So scary. Naz and Gray hugged each other without any backbone. It can't be. Kana also took a few steps back. Are they going to fight again? This isn't called a fight, it's called causing trouble. Noah found that his head was getting more and more painful. Why do these two people dislike each other? Isn't this good? Lise Anna looked at Mira, who was entangled with Alusha, with a gentle gaze. Compared to the old Mira, the current Mira is much more cheerful, isn't she? When they first arrived at Fairy's Tale, Mira was basically the same as the old Alusha. She didn't talk to others and never smiled. She only hid in a corner with a cloak, as if her existence was dispensable. However, later on, as Lise Anna and Elfman learned receiving magic, Mira finally gradually accepted the power of the demon in her body and was no longer so isolated. Moreover, as Mira familiarized herself with receiving magic, her demonized arm also returned to its original state. Not long after, Mira became an out-and-out delinquent girl, just like when she first met Noah. Unfortunately, perhaps because Noah had told Mira and Alusha in private that they behaved very similarly when they first joined the guild, the two began to dislike each other. As a result, the second pair of enemies in Fairy's Tale was born. By the way, the first pair was Naz and Gray. Noah's expression eased a lot, but his headache didn't lessen at all. Isn't this too cheerful? Ahahaha. Lise Anna laughed. Really? Undoubtedly, Mira is very gentle, but she doesn't want to show it. She's always pretending to be strong. Won't she not be able to get a boyfriend like that? Although whether or not she's gentle has yet to be verified, isn't it too early to think about getting a boyfriend? Noah was a little embarrassed. Mira is only 13 like me, right? You're already thinking about such things at the age of 13. That's how girls are. Lise Anna raised her head slightly and met Noah's gaze. Her gaze became as clear as the surface of a lake, swaying gently. Actually, 11-year-old girls are the same, Brother Noah. Noah felt a little uneasy and panicked for some reason. He couldn't help but look away. You're right. You're right. You're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. However, at this moment, Noah suddenly felt a tender little hand squeezing into his hand and clasping his hand tightly. Noah was shocked and subconsciously looked in Lisanna's direction again. Lise Anna still raised her head and looked at Noah with eyes full of enthusiasm. The hand that squeezed into Noah's hand and held his hand tightly was naturally Lisanna's hand. Faced with Lisanna's behavior, Noah could only look away. This wasn't the first time Lise Anna did such a thing. When did it start, Noah himself didn't know. He only knew that sometimes, especially when they were alone, Lise Anna would occasionally show such an aggressive side, as if she was launching an attack on Noah. Many times Noah was at a loss. Surprisingly, Noah couldn't hate Lise Anna like this, but it was inevitable that he felt embarrassed. Thus, Noah could only take out the weapon he always used at this time. What are you talking about? Noah put his empty hand on Lisanna's small head and rubbed it. Undoubtedly, it's just Lise Anna. Don't act like you know. Wah! Lise Anna began to struggle. Brother Noah, you're so annoying. You're like this every time. Who told you to always tease me? You should be punished. It's not a tease, Brother Noah is an idiot. You actually said I'm an idiot, look at my... Wah! Wah! Damn Noah. Mira, who was wrestling with Alusha, was furious. She abandoned Alusha and rushed over here. You're not allowed to bully Lise Anna. Do you want to escape? Seeing that Mira abandoned her, Alusha was also angry and rushed over. Oh, I'm burning up. Fighting? Count me in. Naz and Gray rushed over full of blood. Get out of my way. Then the furious Alusha and Mira sent them flying with a punch each. For a time the whole scene was a mess. Chapter 41. Magnolia Forest Riverbank. Clang! In the sound of metal clashing against metal, the two figures holding different knight swords separated from each other and retreated rapidly. It wasn't until they were some distance away from each other that they finally stabilized themselves and stopped retreating. Huff, huff, huff. Noah and Alusha looked at each other with eyes full of fighting spirit. After calming their breathing slightly, the corners of their mouths rose at the same time. You've become stronger than before, Alusha. The same goes for you, Noah. As if they were rivals, Noah and Alusha both let out a sigh of relief at the same time. Then, a new fighting spirit appeared in their eyes. Again? Again! After a short conversation, the man and woman, who were the best companions and also the best opponents, once again raised their swords and got ready for a charge. Unfortunately, before Noah and Alusha had the time to perform the follow-up of this action, a voice sounded beside them. All right. Stop here. Mira stood up and glared at Alusha. Are you trying to prolong the battle without permission again? It's my turn now. Sister Mira. Lise Anna, who was sitting beside Mira, complained. Why do you have to time it so accurately? Isn't it better to let brother Noah and Elisha continue their relationship? Not at all. Mira said bluntly. If they continue to fight, won't it mean that Elisha will have more time to train? What if she becomes stronger than me? Sister Mira, aren't you being too calculative? Lise Anna puffed up her cheeks. Brother Noah, Elisha, and sister, you three are the strongest among us. You're also the only magic shooters who are allowed to work outside of Magnolia. Naz, Gray, Karna, and Brother Elv are only allowed to work in Magnolia. What's there to be unhappy about? Of course not. Mira said matter-of-factly. No matter who I lose to, I can't lose to Elisha and Noah. I can't let him climb over my head. Sister Mira. Lise Anna sighed. You really? In the center of the field, Noah and Elisha, who were maintaining their charging posture, looked at each other helplessly. After Myra's interference, the state that the two of them had worked so hard to get into was successfully broken. Mira must have seen this point and stopped them on time, right? With no other choice, Noah and Elisha could only sulkily put away their night swords and let their bodies rest after a whole morning of training. Originally, this place was a secret place that only Noah and Elisha knew about. Unless it was Noah and Elisha leading the way, the chances of discovering this place by chance were not very high. The reason why Mira was here was very simple. What? Elisha wants to train? I definitely won't allow her to secretly get stronger. This was the second day after Mira and Elisha officially started fighting. When Mira saw Noah and Elisha planning to train at the forest bank, she immediately shouted those words. Thus Mira became one of the users of this secret place. As for Lise Anna, the reason was even simpler. If big brother Noah and sister Mira are going, then I want to go too. Thus, she became a frequent visitor of this secret place as a bystander. In fact, Naz and Gray wanted to follow as well. In the end, Elisha, who was in a bad mood because Mira had interrupted her training, glared at them and announced their withdrawal. It seemed that the powerful and occasionally violent Elisha had completely become the nemesis of Naz and Gray, the devil in their hearts. Now Noah, Mira, and Elisha would gather here almost every day when they weren't working. Occasionally, they would meet in pairs to train and hone their strength. Originally, Elisha was very dissatisfied with Mira coming along. However, after Mira had completely familiarized herself with received magic, her strength had improved rapidly. It didn't take long for Makarov to approve of her and allow her to go out to work. Now, among the children of the same age group in Fairy Tale, Noah, Mira, and Elisha had impressively become existences like leaders. They were the three strongest children of their age. Even some of the weaker magi in the guild weren't a match for the three of them, causing the magi in the guild to sigh in admiration. It was also because of this that Mira and Elisha became more and more incompatible. They were constantly thinking about how to determine victory and defeat. Even the innocent Noah was dragged into it, just to prove that they were the strongest of the three. In fact, if the three of them were to go all out, their strength should be considered to be on par. It would be very difficult to determine victory and defeat. Of course, Mira and Elisha both knew that the so-called on par was only if Noah didn't use his trump card, even if he used the magical effects of his knight's sword. Up until now, the two girls knew that Noah's knight's sword was a magical weapon. However, as for what kind of abilities and magical effects it had, only Noah and Makarov, the original owner, knew. Speaking of which, brother Noah, sister Mira, Elisha, aren't you going out to work? Lise Anna tilted her head. I remember that you haven't gone out to work for a month. What's wrong? Mira furrowed her brows. Is our living expenses not enough? If we don't have any additional expenses, let me calculate. Lise Anna cutely raised her fingers. We should be able to last for another month. Is that so? Mira thought for a moment and nodded. Then let's go out to work in a few days. I'm not in a hurry for the time being. Elisha shook her head. Even though I really want to save up to buy a magical weapon, I'm still looking for one. So I'll wait a few more days. Mira, Lise Anna, and Elisha turned their gazes to Noah at the same time, their eyes full of questions. Me? Noah's face had a rare expression of joy and excitement. I probably won't be going out to work in the near future. Hearing that, the three girls present were slightly taken aback. Noah grinned and didn't explain. He took out a handful of pitch-black pearls from his backpack and tossed them into the sky. Wang! Vast magical power was like a rolling wave, surging up violently and spreading out fiercely, sweeping across the pitch-black pearls that were falling from the sky. Suddenly, the outlines of all the pitch-black beads were covered with a circle of dim light, causing the pitch-black beads that were falling from the sky to stop in midair. Then the pearls began to dance. It was a scene that could only be described as dancing. Like a comet orbiting a satellite, the pearls, driven by the dense magical power, drew circles around Noah's body. Sometimes they spun up, sometimes they wandered left and right, sometimes they sped up, sometimes they jumped nimbly, constantly flashing through the air. After a long while, Noah stretched out his hand, and the pearls that were drawing beautiful circles around him immediately lined up like bees returning to their hive, falling into Noah's hand in an orderly manner until they all returned to Noah's palm. Noah slowly put away the pearls in his hand. On the other hand, Mira, Lisanna, and Elusa were completely dumbfounded. "Big brother Noah," Lisanna said in a daze. "You just..." It was impossible for Mira and Lisanna, who had joined Fairy's Tale, not to mention Elusha, not to mention that Noah had yet to learn magic because he couldn't control it completely. Hence, the three of them were well aware of what it meant to be able to control the pitch-black beads so beautifully, just like a dance. It was a scene that had reached a godly level of control over mana. In front of the three of them, Noah laughed, and laughed very happily. Chapter 42. In the Fairy Tale Guild, there was a very large library. It was a bookshelf that could hold 10 20-meter-tall bookshelves. There were countless thick and heavy books on it. It was a very, very large library. In this library, there were all the requests that Fairy's Tale had received, the related magic, the necessary knowledge, and so on since the establishment of Fairy's Tale. Rather than a library, it was more like a database. Occasionally, there would be some ancient documents or books that the guild members had obtained from the outside world. Basically, as long as it was related to the world of magic, apart from some of the most confidential information, one would be able to find relevant records in the library. Of course, there were also some common magic books that recorded the method to learn certain spells. Today, Noah planned to stay in the library for the whole night. He even planned to stay for a while to look for books that recorded magic knowledge. Thus, when the sky was about to turn dark and the guild members had all left the guild, Noah stood at the entrance of the guild. He was about to send off Mira, Lisanna, and Elusha, who had accompanied him for the whole day. "Big brother Noah, do you really not need my help?" Lisanna puffed up her cheeks, seemingly a little unhappy. "The library is so big. It'll be very difficult for you to look for magic books alone. I've been to the library before when I was learning Receive Magic. Wouldn't it be better for me to help you?" "If that's the case, are you not going to sleep tonight?" Noah shrugged. "I'm planning to be busy all night, so it's best if you don't accompany me." "I don't care." Lisanna started nagging, but she wasn't confident that she could accompany Noah for the whole night. She could only mumble a few words. "Although I'm not interested in staying with you all night, I'm quite curious about which spell you want to learn," Mira said awkwardly as she crossed her arms and turned her head away. "If you beg me, I can reluctantly accompany you. To be honest, I'm also quite curious about which spell you want to learn." Elusha also looked at Noah. "You really don't need our help? I appreciate your kindness." Noah thought for a while and shook his head. "Tonight, I just want to see if there's any spell I like. I might not be able to learn anything in one night. If you're really curious, it won't be too late to help me tomorrow." "I see." Elusha thought for a while and nodded. "Then there's no other way. I hope you'll be able to learn something tonight." Lisanna seemed like she still wanted to say something, but she was stopped by Mira. "Since others don't want us to meddle in other people's business, why should we stick to them?" Mira snorted coldly. She pulled Lisanna's hand and walked out. "Come on, let's go home and let that man be stubborn." Wait. Sister Mira." Noah scratched his cheek and asked Elusa with a perplexed expression. "What's the matter?" Mira asked as she left with Lisanna and her grumbling. "What's the matter? Did I offend her again? She just wants to help you, but she can't bring herself to do it. That's just how stubborn she is." Elusha didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She then walked in the direction of her own residence. "Then I'll be heading back too. See you tomorrow." Noah nodded silently. He watched as the three of them left. When they were out of sight, he turned around and returned to the interior of the guild. He then walked in the direction of the library. After almost 2 years, Noah had finally trained his mana control to the point of perfection. He had completely controlled the unparalleled mana in his body. Noah clenched his fist that was filled with a sense of strength, and could not help but feel an indescribable sense of excitement when he sensed the mana that was surging in his body like stormy waves, but did not leak out of his body at all. It couldn't be helped. Noah had been waiting for this day for a long time. As long as he could freely control his own mana, Noah would be able to learn magic. In other words, Noah could finally officially embark on the path of learning magic and begin his journey towards becoming a true archmage. Once Noah learned magic, his strength would improve by leaps and bounds. He had spent 2 years of hard training to be able to control the powerful magic power freely in his body. When that time came, surpassing Mira and Elisha, who had always been on par with Noah in terms of strength, would definitely not be a dream. If all went well, he would even be able to surpass the person who had always looked down on Noah and was dissatisfied with Noah. The image of the lightning magic user who had the same special magic power as Naz, blonde hair, sharp eyes, and arrogant expression appeared in Noah's mind. The excitement in Noah's heart turned into determination as he quickened his pace and continued to walk toward the library. After walking for about 5 minutes, Noah climbed over the bar on the first floor of the guild and saw the entrance to the fairy tale library. However, the moment he saw the entrance, Noah stopped in his tracks. A surprised expression appeared on his face. "He's here?" He saw Makarov sitting cross-legged on a box beside the entrance of the fairy tale library. It was rare that he didn't have the wine cup or crutches in his hands. He also didn't wear the clown-like clothes. Instead, he wore a luxurious robe with sacred patterns on it. It was believed that as long as one was in the magic world, 99% of them wouldn't be able to recognize this luxurious robe. That was a robe that only the 10 most outstanding and righteous archmages on the continent, the 10 great saint archmages, could possess. Usually, Makarov would only wear this luxurious robe on very formal occasions, representing his status as one of the 10 saints. Now Makarov was wearing this robe that represented the 10 great holy magicians. One could imagine how much importance Makarov attached to what he was going to do next. Seeing Noah's extremely surprised expression, Makarov grinned. His eyes seemed to be able to see through everything, containing an indescribable radiance. "Have we finally reached this step, grandfather?" Noah hesitated for a moment before speaking in an uncertain tone. "Don't tell me you already know? If you're referring to the matter of you completely controlling your mana, then I do know." Makarov's face was full of affection. "After all, I've seen your hard work in training every day. You've never once lost sight of it." This sentence was like a warm current that drilled into Noah's heart. It turned out that Makarov had always been secretly watching over him, taking care of him without a moment of stagnation. Noah took a deep breath, walked in front of Makarov, and looked him in the eye as he said, "Don't worry. Grandfather, do you have something important to say to me?" "Something important?" Makarov narrowed his eyes and tilted his head. "It's indeed quite important, but I feel that it's time to seriously talk to you." After saying that, Makarov was silent for a moment before speaking. "Noah, I know that you've been avoiding your origins all this time." The look in Noah's eyes suddenly became complicated. Indeed, just like what Makarov said, Noah had actually been intentionally or unintentionally avoiding his origins. Because intuition told Noah that his origins were definitely hiding something that could not be known by others. Chapter 43. For those who knew Noah, Noah was just an orphan who was accidentally adopted by Makarov. However, even Makarov didn't know that Noah was definitely not just an orphan. Noah didn't have the memory of his previous existence at all. When he first met Makarov, Noah's appearance was already that of a 10-year-old child. He was attacked by monsters in the wild, causing Noah's magic to go berserk, which attracted the attention of Makarov, who happened to pass by nearby. Then he was adopted by Makarov. When he was just adopted by Makarov, Makarov also asked Noah about his life experience, but Noah couldn't say at all. There were 2 reasons. One, at that time Noah still couldn't speak. To be precise, it should be said that at that time, Noah still didn't understand the language of this world. He didn't know how to speak and how to express himself verbally. It was like a newborn baby who had intelligence and a 10-year-old appearance in advance. It was particularly strange. 2. Noah didn't have the memory of his life experience at all. When Noah learned the language and could speak, Makarov, who knew about this matter, said that Noah might have lost his memory. However, Noah knew that Makarov's statement was wrong. Noah didn't lose his memory. Just like what was said above, at that time, Noah was like a baby who had intelligence and a 10-year-old appearance in advance. This wasn't a metaphor, but a real fact. In other words, instead of saying that Noah lost his memory before the age of 10, it was better to say that he lost 10 years of time, as if he was already 10 years old when he was born. Although Noah didn't know why he felt this way, he vaguely knew about this matter. It was as if someone was telling him this fact, but it was too inconceivable. Therefore, Noah didn't mention this matter to anyone. Over time, he even stopped pursuing this matter. In Makarov's words, Noah was running away from his past. Of course, this was something that could not be helped. Makarov had also asked someone to help investigate Noah, but he couldn't find anything. It was as if Noah didn't exist in the past. Not even a trace of him could be found. In addition, Noah vaguely felt that he didn't lose his memory. Instead, he was born with the appearance and intelligence of a 10-year-old. No one would think that Noah was an ordinary person. It was even possible that Noah wasn't a person. Under such circumstances, how could Noah not escape from his origins? He didn't want to be treated like a monster. Seeing all the complicated emotions in Noah's eyes, Makarov sighed. You may have your own difficulties, or you may know something. I won't ask you and I won't force you. You can escape or give up. No matter what, I just want to say that you are my grandson, Makarov's grandson, and always will be. Grandpa. Noah closed his eyes. When he opened them again, his eyes had regained their usual clarity. I am Noah Doria. I remember this matter very clearly. That's good. Makarov smiled lightly, but then became serious again. This time what I want to tell you is not about your origins, but about your physique. Physique. Noah was startled. You really didn't notice it? Makarov touched his chin and looked at Noah. Do you remember the first time you entered Magnolia Forest and encountered a snake-shaped monster? Hearing Makarov's words, Noah remembered. When he had just joined Fairy Tale, Noah did not know that there were many powerful monsters in Magnolia Forest. In order to train his magic control, he rashly entered Magnolia Forest and encountered a snake-shaped monster. Noah still remembered that he seemed to have been bitten by the snake and fainted. When he woke up again, he was already sent to Polyesia by Makarov for treatment. After a long period of recuperation, he completely recovered and returned to the guild. Actually, I never told you that after you were bitten by that snake, you were inflicted with a lethal poison and a large number of curses. Makarov's words shocked Noah. This was because Noah clearly remembered that Makarov said that he had only suffered a little injury, and did not mention anything about the poison and curses at all. I didn't tell you, not because I wanted to hide it from you, but because your condition at that time was really strange, Makarov said solemnly, as if he had sunk into his memories. Undoubtedly, when I first found you, you had obvious signs of being poisoned and cursed and were on the verge of death. But when I sent you to Polyesia, the poison and curses in your body had all disappeared. The poison and curses disappeared? Noah could not help but touch his body and frown. Could this have something to do with my physique? That's right. Makarov nodded his head heavily. Just in case, I asked Polyesia to do a body check on you. The result was that your physique seemed to be different from ordinary people, and had characteristics that ordinary people did not have. First of all, your physique is very exclusive. Makarov extended a finger. Negative energy like poison and curses will not work on you at all. Poisoning you and cursing you will not work on you. Your body can reject all negative energy, such as curses, poisons, weakness caused by external forces, and even methods that have the effect of increasing strength, but have side effects will only be left with the effect of increasing strength. And the side effects will be eliminated. Secondly, your physique is very tolerant. Makarov extended a second finger. This tolerance will allow you to absorb some energy that does not originally belong to you, but has entered your body. For example, when you were attacked by the snake magic beast, before sending you to Polyesia, I injected a part of my mana into your body. In the end, this mana was completely absorbed by you. Lastly, your physique is very independent. Ignoring Noah's shocked expression, Makarov extended a third finger. Everyone knows that there is magic power in all things in the world, and it circulates among all things. The magic power of a magic shooter comes from this. Once a magic shooter's magic power is depleted, his body will automatically absorb magic essence from the atmosphere to replenish his magic power. But you're not like that. Even if your magic power is depleted, it will automatically recover. You don't need to absorb external power at all. At this point, Makarov muttered in a low voice. This way it was as if its existence was like an entire world. Shaking his head, Makarov hid the thoughts in the depths of his heart. He looked at the silent Noah. I'm here to tell you this. You'll start learning magic soon, and you'll definitely meet all kinds of opponents in the future. It's absolutely necessary for you to grasp the uniqueness of your body. I hope you'll remember this. Immunity to all negative energy and side effects. Ability to absorb energy that does not belong to you. Ability to automatically recover your mana. These three effects were all demonstrating the extraordinariness of Noah's physique, and also telling Noah he was indeed not an ordinary person. You are a smart child. I believe that you will be able to overcome all difficulties by yourself. Makarov smiled meaningfully. If you want to learn my magic, I welcome you to look for me at any time. Leaving these words, when Noah raised his head, Makarov had already disappeared. Noah stood in the same spot for a long time. After a long time, he let out a long sigh and patted his cheeks. Let's not think about it for now. Let's solve the problem of my magic first. Looking at the library in front of him, Noah lifted his feet and stepped inside. Chapter 44. Fairy's Tale. The Book Vault. Rows of bookshelves that were comparable to the size of buildings were neatly arranged in the vast space. Old or new books were neatly arranged on the bookshelves or scattered on the ground. The smell of books lingered in the air. The peaceful atmosphere fluctuated in the space. Under such circumstances, even the violent Mira could not help but lighten her footsteps and tiptoe into the library. Her invasive gaze swept across the space that was filled with books, and finally fixed on a table in the middle of all the bookshelves. There, the person Mira was looking for was lying on the table with books piled up beside him. Some of the books were still closed, while others were opened and placed in front of the young man. However, the young man did not even read a single word, because his eyes were tightly shut, and he looked like he was in a deep sleep. Seeing this, Mira frowned and snorted softly. He said that he was going to fight hard all night, but in the end he was so tired that he fell asleep. Mira did not know that Noah had learned from Makarov that he was different from ordinary people last night, so he was exhausted and fell asleep. She walked down the stairs and walked in the direction of Noah. Looking down at Noah, who was lying on the table sleeping, Mira stretched out her hand, obviously wanting to slap Noah awake. However, in the next moment, an unexpected scene appeared in front of Mira. Drip! With an extremely soft sound, a drop of sparkling liquid slid down the cheek of Noah, who was sleeping on the table, and splashed onto the table, soaking that area. That was Noah's tear. Mira's eyes, that seemed to be filled with fierce and powerful emotions, suddenly trembled. She could not help but panic, and for a moment she did not know what to do. Crying. Noah cried? Why? Mira could not get an answer to this question. At least she could not get an answer now. However, the scene of Noah crying in his sleep did bring a great shock to Mira. This was the first time Mira saw Noah cry. Before this, Mira's impression of Noah was that he was capable, powerful, and had a stronger will than ordinary people. He had a strong sense of autonomy and was a very gentle person. After all, before he joined Fairy Tale, Noah had saved Mira, Elfman, and Lisanna, who were in danger. He also exposed the truth of Mira being possessed by a demon, and led the three of them into Fairy Tale. To Mira, Noah was an existence that saved her. Most importantly, back then, Noah did not mind caressing Mira's demonic arm that represented trauma and painful memories. This scene was deeply engraved in Mira's heart. Mira could not believe that such a person would have a weak side to him that would shed tears. However, even if she knew that Noah had a weak side that ordinary people did not know about, what could she do? She stared blankly at Noah lying on the table, tears flowing out of his closed eyes from time to time and dripping onto the table. Mira was at a loss for what to do. After a while, she hesitated and reached out with trembling hands to wipe away the tears on Noah's cheeks. As Mira wiped, Noah seemed to feel a little itchy. He wrinkled his nose and adjusted his posture. Mira, who thought that he was going to wake up, was startled. When Noah's clear breathing sound entered her ears again, Mira heaved a sigh of relief. At this time, Noah's eyes were no longer tearing up. It was as if he had been disturbed and the dream had changed. His expression was unusually peaceful. Looking at Noah's peaceful sleeping face, Mira continued to wipe Noah's cheeks with her hands. Or rather, she was caressing Noah's cheeks. Her hands were no longer trembling, and she was no longer afraid. Instead, she was reluctant to part with it. Could it be that the reason she insists on waking him up every day is to see such a sleeping face? Mira muttered to herself. She could not help but reveal her inner thoughts. This is really sly. As she said that, Mira began to stare at Noah's sleeping face. She seemed to have thought of something. First she smiled. Her smile was unprecedentedly sweet. Then her cheeks turned red. She sneakily looked around and glanced at Noah's sleeping face. She actually swallowed a mouthful of saliva. If it's just for a while, it shouldn't be a problem, right? Myra's cheeks grew redder and redder as she said those words. Finally, as if she had mustered up some courage, she bent down in Noah's direction. At this time, Myra's eyes were like ripples in water. They were abnormally blurry. Myra's delicate and cute face was also inching closer to Noah's peaceful sleeping face, causing a pink atmosphere to reverberate in the air. Chirp. Although it was soft because of the quiet environment, it was unusually clear. Myra's tender lips finally came into contact with Noah's lips, causing the pink atmosphere to become a little warmer, and the atmosphere became a little hot. Ugh! After an unknown amount of time, Mira reluctantly let go of Noah's lips. She straightened her body and stroked her mouth with one hand. Her cheeks were incomparably red, her eyes were blurred, and her expression was blank. It was as if she had lost her mind. My first kiss was given to him? As if even she couldn't believe what had happened, Mira stroked her lips. After a long while, she embarrassedly held her red cheeks and softly cried out, What did I do? Just as he finished speaking, a voice full of doubt came from behind Mira. What did you do? Wah! The sudden voice made Mira, who had a guilty conscience, scream out loud. The newcomer seemed to be startled by Myra's sudden scream and also let out a scream. Mira hurriedly turned around and looked behind her. Then she panicked and stuttered. Lisana. It's me. Lisana patted her little chest and stared blankly at the panicked and blushing Mira. Sister Mira, what's wrong? Why did you suddenly scream? Nothing. Mira took a few steps back and laughed ingratiatingly. Her voice was a little hoarse. Lisana, when did you come? Just now. Lisana looked at her sister with a puzzled expression. What's wrong? Know that this. Mira began to fidget. Did you see anything just now? See what? Lisana looked more and more puzzled. Should I have seen something? Hearing this, Mira silently breathed a sigh of relief and gradually returned to her original calmness. Sister Mira. Lisana stared at Mira and puffed out her cheeks. Are you hiding something from me? Ahaha. Mira guiltily looked away. How could I hide something from you, right? How suspicious. Lisana stared at Mira, causing Mira to feel even more guilty. She unconsciously reached out her hand and covered her mouth. Lisana was momentarily stunned. Then, as if she had thought of something, she hurriedly turned her head and looked at Noah, who was sleeping on the table. When she saw that Noah's lips were moist and swollen, Lisana's eyes widened and she looked at Mira in disbelief. Sister Mira, could it be that you? It's about time to wake him up. Mira frantically interrupted Lisana and said embarrassedly. Lisana, aren't you curious about what magic he learned? Then hurry up and wake him up. Lisana pouted and tears welled up in her eyes. Sister Mira, you're too sly. Little did she know that Mira had just said the same thing. Chapter 45. An indescribable silence hung in the air of the huge library. Noah held a thick book in his hands, But his attention wasn't on it. Instead, he was looking forward, his eyes filled with subtle emotions. Across from Noah, Mira and Lisanna were sitting side by side, but they weren't as rowdy as they usually were. Upon closer inspection, one could see that their reactions were a little abnormal. First was Mira. Mira was no longer the violent girl she used to be. Not only did she look a little embarrassed, her cheeks were also flushed. While she was cute, this wasn't the Mira Noah knew. Lisanna was the complete opposite. While she was the youngest of them all, she was also the most mischievous and precocious. Today, however, she was acting like a child, sulking as if she was angry. This scene had been going on ever since Noah was woken up by the inexplicably angry Lisanna. Looking at the pair of adorable sisters who were abnormal from all aspects, Noah felt rather depressed. As a result, he couldn't concentrate on the book in his hand at all. Noah lifted his head from the book and looked at Lisanna. Humph. Lisanna snorted and turned her head away, still looking angry. Noah blinked and turned his gaze to Mira. Myra's shoulders shook in an extremely exaggerated manner, and her originally pink cheeks immediately turned red. She glared at Noah and called out in an extremely embarrassed manner. What? Do you want to fight? Oh. Noah was puzzled. It wasn't strange for Mira to look for a fight. What was strange was that when Mira said, "Do you want to fight?" in a domineering and vicious manner, what was up with her flushed cheeks and delicate version of "Do you want to fight?" Noah really didn't know what had happened between the two sisters, so he decided not to think about it and asked directly. I say, are you guys hiding something from me? Hearing this, the white-haired sisters reacted differently. Mira shuddered and turned her head away with a guilty conscience. Lisanna, on the other hand, seemed even angrier. She even shouted at Noah. Brother Noah is a big idiot. The questions in Noah's heart almost broke through the sky. Could it be that this was the legendary young girl's heart that men couldn't understand? Then, if you have the time to chat, why don't you hurry up and find a spell that you like? Mira changed the topic uncomfortably. Don't you want to learn magic? Of course I want to learn. Noah felt that he wouldn't be able to get any answers even if he continued to pursue the matter. He could only sigh as he adjusted the spellbook in his hand. Aren't we looking for it? Seeing that the topic was finally back on track, Lisanna also gradually returned to her usual self. She tilted her head and asked, You've been looking for a whole night. Haven't you found a suitable one yet? Basically, all the magic books in the guild's library are here. Noah patted the books that were piled up like a small hill on the table next to him, looking helpless. But I've been looking for a whole night, and I still haven't found a suitable one. Is it that difficult? Mira muttered as she grabbed a book and flipped through it. It's just choosing a spell, not choosing clothes. Can't you just pick the most powerful, and most useful spell? It's not that the more powerful the spell, the better it is. For example, your receive spell is considered extremely ordinary, while Naz's Dragon Slayer spell is a precious lost spell from ancient times. But aren't you still much stronger than Naz? Noah used one hand to support his cheek as his tone became a little bored. That's why I chose to choose slowly. Otherwise, I would have gone straight to Grandpa. He definitely knows a lot of precious, rare, and powerful spells. In fact, Noah had also thought of using the method of self-awakening to learn magic. After all, self-awakening magic might not necessarily be the most powerful, but it was the most suitable for the target of awakening magic, and the most suitable for the target of awakening magic. However, it wasn't that easy to do this. There was a most crucial problem, and that was, Noah didn't know how to awaken the magic hidden in his body. Everyone's way of awakening their own magic was different. Mira, for example, awakened her receive spell after coming into contact with a demon. Alesha also learned her magic through self-awakening. And Alesha's way of awakening her magic, according to Alesha herself, was to strengthen her heart in a moment of crisis, and thus awaken her outfit-changing magic. Noah didn't know how to awaken his own magic. 90% of the world's sorcerers chose to learn magic on their own for this reason, and Noah naturally wasn't surprised. Moreover, what if the most suitable magic for oneself was not suitable for battle after awakening? The method of awakening magic was unknown, and the type of magic was also unknown. This caused 99% of the world's sorcerers to learn magic by themselves. Noah had already delayed his awakening for 2 whole years because of the problem of magic. Now that he could finally learn magic, he didn't want to pin his hopes on an unknown self-awakening. "Brother Noah, why don't you learn receive spell like us?" Lysana's eyes lit up as she suggested. "This way we can use the same magic." Hearing this, Noah looked at Mira, but inadvertently saw a trace of anticipation in her eyes, and he scratched his cheek. "It's not that I haven't considered receive spell, but I'm not as special as Mira, who can accept the power of demons, so I've been thinking about it." Hearing Noah's words, Mira and Lysana opened their mouths at the same time, and just as they were about to say something, a loud sound interrupted them. Ding-dong! 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 It was a sound as loud as the bells in the church. As if it was some kind of festival, the loud sound of a bell suddenly rang throughout the entire fairy's tale, and even the whole of Magnolia. The sound was so loud that almost everyone in Magnolia could hear it. Before Noah, Mira, and Lysana could do anything, a huge commotion reverberated from the fairy's tale guild outside the library. "Kildas! It's Kildas! Kildas is back!" At the same time, Noah, Mira, and Lysana heard an alarm ring in the sky above Magnolia. Magnolia has changed to Kilda's mode. Residents, please proceed to the designated location as soon as possible. As soon as the alarm sounded, Noah, Mira, and Lysana felt the ground begin to shake. What's going on? Noah stood up and looked at the books on the shelves that were trembling. Mira hurriedly pulled Lysana behind her to protect her. "Kildas!" The guild was still in an uproar. "Kildas?" Mira and Lysana looked at each other in confusion. "Who's Kildas?" Noah frowned and walked towards the door without saying a word. Mira and Lysana hurriedly followed him out of the library. Oh! When Noah, Mira, and Lysana came out of the library and went to the bar on the first floor of the guild, they saw a scene like this. All the magic shooters in the guild fell silent as if the commotion just now was all fake. Their gazes converged in the direction of the main entrance. Meanwhile, at the entrance of the guild, a figure was slowly approaching. Chapter 46. Almost in an instant, Noah held his breath and, like the people around him, focused his gaze in the direction of the gate. Even though he was inside the guild, Noah could clearly see what was happening outside. If there was a word to describe Noah's current mood, it would be shock. This was because Magnolia had cracked open. Magnolia, which originally had many buildings, was divided into 2 sides with the guild entrance as the dividing line. 2 thick walls were built to protect the buildings on both sides. As a result, there was a road leading from the outside of Magnolia to the entrance of the fairy's tale. Under such circumstances, the existence named Kildas slowly walked over from the opposite side of the road and stepped into the gate of the guild. He was a middle-aged man around 40 years old. Moreover, it was a middle-aged man who wore a dusty cloak. His chin was full of stubble, and he looked rather sloppy. Such a sloppy middle-aged man carrying a cloth bag walked in from the outside and appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Undoubtedly, he was just a sloppy middle-aged man, but Noah felt a strong sense of presence from him. Of course, what Noah cared about was not the strong sense of presence, but the factor that caused this sense of presence to manifest. Noah clearly felt it with his powerful senses. The body of this sloppy middle-aged man in front of him hid a power so powerful that it could defeat Noah in an instant. Noah subconsciously clenched his fists and his body tensed up as if he had entered a state of battle. He stared at the middle-aged man named Kildas. Kildas had just stepped into the guild entrance and only had time to look around. Then, he suddenly tilted his head in confusion and fixed his gaze on Noah. The members of the guild who wanted to greet Kildas also seemed to have noticed that something was wrong. They looked at each other and forgot to speak. Mira, Lysana, Elusha, Naz, Gray, Karna, Elfman, and the other children of the same age seemed to be thirsty. Their lips became dry and they opened their mouths, but no words came out. In the air, a solemn atmosphere was spreading. Looking at Noah, who was staring at him with his body tensed up as if he was ready to fight at any time, Kildas suddenly smiled. His smile was very steady. "It seems that there are some interesting people in the guild while I was away. But I'm not your enemy, so you don't have to be so wary of me, right?" Kildas's steady and light voice spread throughout the guild, instantly dispersing the solemn atmosphere. Upon hearing Kildas's words, Noah was taken aback. Then he realized that his actions were a little too intense. He took in a deep breath and slowly relaxed his body before bowing and apologizing. I'm sorry, my reaction was too intense. You don't have to take it to heart. Kildas's serious expression turned into a frivolous and exaggerated smile, and then he then asked curiously, compared to that, I'm more curious about why you're suddenly wary of me. Because you're very strong. Noah replied without hiding anything. I can feel that you're very strong. If you were to attack me, I'm afraid that you could defeat or even kill me in an instant. Hearing Noah's words, Mira, Lisanna, and Alusha, who were of the same age as him, revealed astonished expressions. On the other hand, the magic shooters in the guild took it for granted. So that's why you're suddenly wary of me. You're afraid that I would attack you? Kildas was stunned at first, but he soon burst into laughter. That's interesting. Hey! At this moment, Naz jumped out and pointed at Kildas arrogantly. Who are you? Me. Kildas pointed at himself and grinned. My name is Kildas, and I'm also a sorcerer from Fairy's Tale. Fairy Tale's sorcerer. Mira, Lisanna, Elusa, Elfman, and the others all looked at each other in bewilderment. Kana. Noah, on the other hand, cast his gaze to Kana, who was standing at the side, and asked this senior, who was the first to join Fairy Tale among the children of the same age. Do you know him? However, Noah did not get a response, because Kana was staring blankly at Kildas, who was standing at the door. She did not say a single word and looked absent-minded. Seeing this, Noah pushed Kana's shoulder in a daze. Kana. Ah! Kana exclaimed softly. When she came back to her senses, she forced a smile on her face. What's wrong? Didn't you hear what I said? Noah was puzzled. Are you not feeling well? No. I'm fine. Kana quickly brushed it off. What did you just say? I want to ask you, who is this person? Noah could only suppress his doubts and ask again. Why did Magnolia suddenly have such a change? Are you talking about Kildas? Kana looked at Kildas again. Noah did not know if it was an illusion, but he felt that Kana looked at Kildas with a complicated and special gaze. He's the strongest sorcerer in Fairy Tale. The strongest magic shooter in Fairy Tale. Noah was surprised. You mean he is stronger than Grandpa? I don't know about this. Kana touched her head embarrassedly. After I joined Fairy Tale, Kildas has been known as the strongest magic shooter in Fairy Tale. As for whether he is stronger than the president, only the president knows. Then why did Magnolia become like that? Noah turned his head and looked at Magnolia, which had been split in half to create a path to the fairy's tail. Is it because of Kildas? Yes. Kana nodded heavily. Because the magic that Kildas used was the superior grade destruction magic crush. Noah's eyes suddenly became cold. There were thousands of magic spells in the magic world. Some of them were ancient magic that had been passed down since ancient times and developed by the ancestors. Some were lost since ancient times, and only a few people had the luck to learn the lost magic. Some were new magic spells that were developed by some outstanding magic shooters. Some were rare magic spells that were obtained from documents that were left behind by some powerful magic shooters. Among so many magic spells, there were naturally some that were far more powerful than ordinary magic. Once learned, the power would be extremely outstanding. Superior grade destruction magic. Magic with this title meant that in the field of destruction, this magic was definitely at the forefront of all magic, far surpassing the existence of other magic spells. Although it could not be said to be the strongest, it was still many times stronger than ordinary magic spells. In terms of destruction, perhaps even Naz's Dragon Slayer magic could not be compared to this magic spell. Kildas seems to be unable to control his magic properly. If he is not careful, it will cause a lot of damage. Kana explained. So, in order to not cause unnecessary losses, Magnolia specially switched to a mode that was convenient for Kildas to walk when he returned. Noah was a little speechless, but then he became excited. Destructive power that even the town had to avoid? Superior grade destruction magic, how powerful was it? Chapter 47. With the return of Kildas, the magic shooters of Fairy Tale were in an extremely excited state for the whole day. It was not only because Kildas was the strongest magic shooter in Fairy Tale, but also because Kildas was usually wandering outside and rarely returned to the guild. Sometimes Kildas would spend a lot of time on extremely difficult missions. Sometimes Kildas just wanted to travel outside and train himself while living the life of a wandering hero, so he spent a lot of time in other places. Everyone knew that the strongest magic shooter in fairy tale was a person called Kildas, but Kildas rarely appeared in the guild. Naturally, when he returned, everyone became excited. Not to mention the magic that Kildas used was the superior destruction magic, Crush. Therefore, even if he was just passing by Magnolia, it would still cause a big commotion. Fortunately, Kildas did not stay in the guild for too long today. After seeing that Makarov was not in the guild, he left a sentence, "I'll come back tomorrow," and left directly. Following Kildas's departure, the guild gradually returned to its original state. However, the guild was still in an excited state, which made the children of Noah's generation who were not familiar with Kildas very curious. That guy is the most powerful sorcerer in fairy tale? If I beat him, I'll be the strongest, right? The hot-bloodedness spat out flames and rushed out of the guild after saying this. Idiot! Gray, who joined fairy tale only a few years later than Katrina, was also not familiar with Kildas, but he had more or less heard of Kildas's rumors. He sneered at Naz and sat on the side chatting with others. He even took off his clothes. Kildas! Elisha pondered for a while, and then walked out of the guild with a determined expression. She must have been stimulated by Kildas and decided to use him as a target to strengthen her training. A man among men. Elfman mumbled. Elfman muttered these words with a longing look in his eyes. It seemed that he had taken Kildas as his idol. Katrina stared blankly at the direction Kildas left and did not say anything for a long time. I don't know why everyone is so excited about such a big uncle. This was Myra's vicious and disdainful comment. He's quite manly but very sloppy. Are all boys like that when they grow up? This was the sigh of the mischievous Lys-Anna as she blinked her big eyes. Noah was the only one who glanced around at his companions before he quietly left and walked towards his room. Phew! Lying on his bed, Noah slowly exhaled and closed his eyes, sinking into silence. To be honest, the appearance of Kildas not only stimulated Elisha and the others, but also stimulated Noah. With extraordinary senses, Noah clearly knew how powerful Kildas, the strongest magic shooter in fairy tale, was. Noah had only felt such a strong sense of presence and power from one person so far. Makarov. In other words, as the strongest magic shooter in fairy tale, even if he was not as strong as Makarov, he was definitely at the level of the 10 great Saint Magi. Noah really did not expect that there would be such a powerful existence in fairy tale. Kildas is definitely an S-rank magic shooter. S-rank magic shooter. That was a title that only magic shooters who passed the internal test of the guild and were recognized by the guild's president could have. In the Fiori Kingdom, as long as it was one of the top guilds, there would be at least 1 or 2 S-rank magic shooters. Due to the differences in the internal tests of each guild, the strength of the S-rank sorcerers in each guild was also different. However, even in the Phantom Lord, which had a large number of people and many branches, the number of S-rank sorcerers did not exceed 5. Fairy Tale's S-rank magic shooters test was notoriously difficult. Until now, Noah had only heard of S-rank magic shooters in the guild, but had never seen one. Today, Kilda's appearance made Noah certain that he was definitely an S-rank magic shooter in fairy tale. Grandpa always forbade me from going to the second floor, saying that there were extremely difficult missions that only magic shooters who were recognized by him could take on. In the past, I did not know what level I had to be considered as being recognized by Grandpa. Could it be that I have to be at Kilda's level? Noah sighed. Looks like I'm still far from it. Noah did not know that his thoughts were preconceived. The second floor of the fairy's tale was only accessible to S-rank magic shooters in the guild, and only S-rank magic shooters could accept quests from inside the fairy's tale. The S-rank magic shooters in fairy tale were very high, but how could it be so high that only people who had reached the level of the 10 great saints could become one? Kildas had undoubtedly reached the level of the 10 great saints, so it was natural for him to become an S-rank magic shooter. Noah equating Kildas, a 10 great saints, with an S-rank magic shooter was somewhat wrong. However, this did not hinder Noah's next decision. Reaching out, Noah looked at his palm that was facing the ceiling and clenched it tightly. The problem of magic has to be solved as soon as possible. With that said, Noah couldn't help but have an idea in his mind, and it got out of hand. At this moment there was a light knock on the door, and Lysana's little head poked in. Seeing Noah lying on the bed and staring blankly at the ceiling, she faintly sighed. "Big brother Noah, why did you suddenly leave? You made me look for you for so long." "What's wrong? Are you hungry?" Noah did not even turn his head as he casually replied. "Sorry, Lysana, I can't eat with you today. I'm thinking about some things you can eat with Mira and the others. It's morning now, and I've already eaten breakfast. I won't be hungry so soon." Lysana walked over angrily and slapped away Noah's clenched fist that was facing the ceiling. She then put her hands on her waist. "Big brother Noah, I find that you're getting more and more annoying." "Huh?" Noah looked at her with a puzzled expression. "I don't think I've done anything to annoy you, right?" "You have. You have." Lysana's eyes were starting to moisten. "Big brother Noah, do you not like me anymore? Where did this come from?" Noah hurriedly got up and looked at Lysana, who was about to cry at any time. He felt a headache coming on. "Lysana, don't cry. As long as you don't cry, I'll do anything." "Really?" Lysana secretly glanced at Noah with teary eyes, her eyeballs rolling. Then close your eyes." Noah immediately closed his eyes. The next moment, an extremely soft touch covered Noah's lips, causing him to frown slightly. However, he did not suspect anything and continued to close his eyes. After a while, the soft touch disappeared and Noah heard Lysana's laughter. When he opened his eyes, he saw her blushing face, but she looked extremely happy. "I'm even with big sister Mira." After saying that, Lysana skipped out of Noah's room. Noah scratched his face. What's going on? Chapter 48. The next day, it was the second day after Kilda's return to Fairy's Tale. Noah got out of bed, put on the clothes that Lysana had chosen, and went to the bar on the first floor of the guild with Lysana. Lysana wanted to hide behind Noah as soon as she went downstairs. After all, Naz and Gray would pounce on Noah for a duel every time this happened, and then they would be dealt with by Noah. Lysana didn't want to be implicated in this process. However, Lysana soon discovered it. Today, Naz and Gray didn't pounce on Noah at all. Instead, they sat at a wooden table. Naz, who was sitting there, was hugging his arms with tears in the corners of his eyes. He looked angry and there was a bump on his head. Gray was making fun of Naz, which made Naz very angry. His eyes became more and more moist, and he looked like he could cry at any time. Beside Naz and Gray, Mira, Elisha, Kana, Elfman, and the others were also there. They looked at Naz, who had a bump on his head, and seemed to be scolding him, which made Naz a little dejected. What's wrong with Naz? Noah naturally noticed this phenomenon and felt a little strange. Could it be that he went to challenge Mira or Elisha in advance and was defeated? The two looked at each other and walked in the direction of Naz. Hey, Sister Mira. Lysana pulled Myra's hand and asked curiously, "What's wrong with Naz?" "Lysana?" The moment Mira saw Lysana, she glanced at Noah without a trace and then snorted coldly. He deserves it. Naz seems to have gone to duel with Kilda's. Elisha spread her hands and said helplessly, "In the end you saw it too?" This simple sentence made Noah and Lysana immediately understand, and they laughed bitterly at the same time. Should I really say as expected of Naz? It's really Nazi style. No matter what, the opponent is still the strongest magic shooter in the guild. How could this bastard succeed? Gray held his head in his hands. Even Noah said that Kilda's is very strong enough to defeat him in an instant. You can't even defeat Noah, how can you defeat Kilda's? No matter what, this opponent's level is too high. Kana sighed and then pointed at Gray as if nothing had happened and reminded him. And Gray, where are your clothes? Oh. As usual, Gray was slow to realize that he was only wearing a pair of shorts. Hey Noah, is that Uncle Kilda's really that strong? Elfman asked Noah in a surprised tone. Strong enough to defeat you in an instant? Everyone present turned their eyes to Noah, and their eyes were filled with the same surprise as Elfman's. At the same time, they were full of doubts. It couldn't be helped. These juniors didn't know what kind of strength Kilda's had, but they knew very well what kind of strength Noah had. Even if he didn't know magic, Noah still relied on his excellent swordsmanship, and his strength was comparable to the strongest among them, Mira and Elisha. Even if Naz and Gray joined forces to sneak attack Noah, Noah could still defeat Naz and Gray in an instant. They believed that even if Noah was compared to the magic shooters in the guild with real strength, he would definitely not lose out to them. Therefore, even Naz, who had been defeated by Kildas, and Kana, who seemed to have a strange attitude towards Kildas, doubted that Noah would be defeated in an instant. Mira, Lisanna, Elisha, Gray, and the others who had a good relationship with Noah were even more suspicious. In front of everyone, Noah shrugged. I can only say that Kildas is really strong. If he gets serious, I definitely won't be able to hold on for a second. A second? Everyone's eyes widened to the maximum at the same time. At this moment, a voice sounded from the side. Yo, you're still so energetic today. Hearing this voice before anyone could react, Naz had already jumped up. Kildas, who had not changed his attire at all, had a sloppy face full of stubble. He greeted the surrounding guild members while walking towards the group of children. Seeing Kildas walking towards them, the group of young boys and girls began to feel a little nervous. Only Noah and Naz, one was sizing up Kildas, and the other was shouting excitedly. Kildas, let's continue our duel. Duel. Kildas touched his head and waved his hand with a look of disgust. Sorry, let's talk about it next time. Okay. Although he said okay, Naz had already moved his body and was ready to rush in the direction of Kildas. Idiot. Gray and Elfman pounced on Naz and held him down, making Naz struggle and shout. Let me go. Let me go. I want to duel with Kildas. You bastard. Kildas was helpless. So impulsive, is he really a young man? Isn't this good? Elisha, who had been sizing up Kildas with a scrutinizing gaze, smiled coldly. Since Naz has so much fighting spirit, it's not bad for you to accompany him, right? No, I just came back not long ago, and I haven't rested enough. Kildas still waved his hand with a perfunctory look. Naz, who only knows how to be straightforward, won't have any advantage in dueling with me, so let's forget about it. Hearing this, everyone nodded one after another. The strength of Kildas was unfathomable. If one wanted to challenge such an existence, one would have to use roundabout tactics and strategies when one's own strength was at a serious disadvantage. Only then could one have a pitiful chance of winning. For someone like Naz, who only knew how to charge forward, it was needless to say, no matter how fiercely he charged, he would just be sending himself to death. The pitiful chance of defeating Kildas was directly reduced to zero. Therefore, everyone could understand the meaning of Kildas' words. However, the development of the next moment was beyond everyone's understanding. Then, Noah raised his head and looked at Kildas with a provocative smile. How about I fight with you? Noah. Everyone was shocked. Kildas was also stunned. Looking at Noah, the lazy and sloppy expression on his face gradually disappeared and was replaced by the steady smile that he had when he first returned to the guild yesterday. Then I'll accompany you for a while. Everyone was stunned at first, and then they exclaimed at the same time. Come on. Instead of cheering, voices came from all around, more like joining in the fun. Noah, brother Noah. Mira, Lisanna, Elisha, Naz, Gray, Kana, and Elfman stood in the center of the crowd. Some of their faces were full of worry, some of them were full of seriousness, and some of them looked excited. It seemed that they were having more fun than Noah. On the other side of the human wall built by the magic shooters, Noah solemnly held a sheathed knight's sword in his hand and stared at Kildas, one hand still holding the hilt of his sword. Compared to Noah, Kildas had a relaxed smile on his face. Before we fight, let me ask you a question. Kildas chuckled. Why do you suddenly want to fight with me? Didn't you say that I can defeat you in an instant? Then you have to be serious. Noah maintained the most natural posture of drawing his sword and chuckled. And before you get serious, I think I can still exchange a few moves with you. Actually, I'm quite curious about the president's grandson. After all, his other grandson is your brother in name. Sooner or later, I'll have to admit defeat to him, right? Kildas gestured at Noah provocatively. So let me see what you're capable of. Noah did not answer, but his grip on his sword tightened. Chapter 49. Big Brother Noah. Seeing that the battle was about to begin, Lisanna, who was most worried about Noah, could not help but shout, "Be careful." Noah nodded slightly and turned to look at the relaxed Kildas. He slowly lifted his foot and stomped it down. Bang! A loud stomping sound came from under Noah's foot. Noah's body turned into a black shadow and rushed towards Kildas. "Good speed," Kildas praised. He clenched his fist and directly raised it in front of himself. A layer of dim light was faintly shining on his arm. Clang! The black shadow suddenly stopped in front of Kildas and swung his knight's sword mercilessly towards Kildas's hand. The result was the sound of metal clashing. "You're quite strong too." After blocking Noah's attack with his bare hand, Kildas's body trembled slightly. He laughed in surprise at Noah, who had taken a step back. Instead of attacking, he swung his arm. "No way." In the crowd, Mira, Lisanna, and Alusha were all dumbfounded. He blocked Noah's attack with his bare hand? Noah also stared at Kildas's swinging arm. With his extraordinary sensing ability, Noah felt the mana covering it. To be honest, the mana covering Kildas's arm was not that exaggerated. At most, it was used to strengthen the hardness of his body. If it was someone else who used the same amount of mana to strengthen their body and block Noah's attack with their bare hand, their hand would definitely be chopped off. However, Kildas used the same amount of mana to strengthen his arm and block Noah's attack. Others might find it inconceivable, but Noah realized that something was wrong. Kildas didn't just use his mana to strengthen his arm. Noah could clearly feel that the mana covering Kildas's arm was compressed into a ball like water. This was the secret behind how Kildas was able to block Noah's attack with his bare hand. When ordinary people used mana to strengthen their arm, it was like using mana as water while their hand was soaked in water. This way, when someone slashed with a sword, the water would more or less create resistance, reducing the strength and threat of the attack. Not only did Kildas use magic to strengthen the hardness of his arms, he also squeezed the magic into a dense ball, directly compressing the water into ice. The result of this was that ice was able to block the slash, unlike water, which was only able to obstruct the slash and reduce its power. Noah had never seen such a way of using mana before, and it made Noah's eyes light up as he came to a sudden realization. So mana could be used like this? Noah, who had a lot of understanding, glanced at the knight's sword in his hand, and his eyes flashed. Since Kildas could compress his mana and increase its density to strengthen his arm, then if he used the same method to cover his sword with mana, would he be able to greatly increase the sharpness of his sword? Thinking of this, Noah directly turned his thoughts into actions. The mana in his body flowed out continuously and gathered on the knight's sword in his hand. To be precise, it should be said that it gathered on the body of the knight's sword. Then, Noah used his superb control over magic power that he had trained hard for 2 years to control the magic power that covered the knight's sword. He compressed the magic power that flowed like water on the sword into a thin layer that was even thinner than the sword itself. Kildas, who noticed this, was really surprised this time. But before Kildas could say anything, Noah once again rushed out. His body shot out like a bullet from a gun, and the knight's sword in his hand rubbed against the air. In the sharp sound of the air breaking, he slashed towards Kildas. Kildas's gaze turned cold. He hurriedly raised his hand that was compressed with mana and blocked in front of himself. Clang! A loud sound like the ringing of a bell reverberated in the air. Kildas, who was at ease just now, actually took a step back in the sound of the bell. His eyes were full of shock as he looked at Noah. Kildas retreated. The magic shooters of Fairy Tale suddenly burst into an uproar. A 13-year-old child had forced the strongest S-rank magic shooters of Fairy Tale to retreat? Although Kildas was careless and didn't expect Noah to suddenly use mana in such a way, it was natural for outsiders to be surprised. As for Mira, Lisanna, and the others, their faces were full of joy. On the other hand, Noah, who had caused this scene, seemed to be immersed in it. His pupils gradually constricted. It can be even thinner and sharper. Muttering this sentence, the mana covering the knight's sword in Noah's hand surged and became even thinner and sharper. In fact, Noah even made the magic vibrate and rub against each other like a chainsaw. Ha! With a cold shout, the knight's sword in Noah's hand turned into a blur and swung forward like a storm, leaving behind streaks of dazzling sword light. His vision was filled with streaks of sword light in an instant, which made Kildas tremble. He quickly raised his other hand and used both hands to block in front of his body. Clang, 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 clang. In the center of the field, streaks of sword light fell on the pair of muscular arms. It was as if they were chopping on some kind of steel, and the sound of bells rang out continuously. It can be even thinner and sharper. Noah's gaze became sharper and sharper, and the knight's sword in his hand swung even more violently. The mana covering the sword was becoming thinner and thinner, and the friction was getting faster and faster, making the sword sharper and sharper. Perhaps under such circumstances, Noah already had the ability to slash a house in half with a single slash. However, such powerful slashes only left white marks on Kildas's arm that was blocking in front of him. They couldn't even scratch the skin on Kildas's hand. What a shocking fellow! Yi Zichen sighed. Hiding behind his crossed arms, Kildas raised his head and looked through the streaks of sword light that formed a net and fixed his gaze on Noah's face. Then, he slowly raised the corner of his mouth. But this is not enough. After saying that, Kildas abruptly opened his arms. Bang! The streaks of sword light that were slashing towards Kildas's arms were like a spider web and were easily blown up by Kildas. However, Noah was not surprised when he saw Kildas's exposed chest. Instead, he was delighted. Now's the time. Wave-like magic power surged out of Noah's body and gushed into the knight's sword in his hand, pouring into the blade of the knight's sword. The knight's sword in Noah's hand emitted a strong light. Clang! Along with the sound of the sword, a comet-like sword light burst out from the space with a sharp sonic boom. It was like a meteor flashing by, and almost instantly arrived in front of Kildas. Kildas's expression changed and then froze. For the first time since the beginning of the match, he had a serious expression on his face. You're too naive. Lowering his body slightly, Kildas abruptly stretched out one of his hands and directly clenched it. A monstrous amount of mana surged out from his hand. Bang! Under the gazes of the crowd, the dazzling sword light turned into powder like a piece of dough when Kildas clenched his fist. Then Kildas threw a punch at Noah's face, whose pupils had shrunk. Chapter 50. Dong! Along with a low muffled sound, the hearts of the surrounding onlookers also jumped fiercely. Soon after, everyone present saw it. Noah's small body was like a kite with a short string. His body flipped a few times in the air and flew out. Then he landed heavily on the ground dozens of meters away, making a loud crashing sound. Noah, brother Noah! Mira, Lisanna, Alusha, Naz, Gray, Karna and Elfman all exclaimed in unison as they ran madly towards Noah. Oh no! Even Kildas, who was still in the posture of swinging his fist, was shocked. I accidentally got serious. Brother Noah! Lisanna helped Noah up from the ground, her eyes almost instantly tearing up. Brother Noah! Brother Noah! Mira stood in front of Kildas, her body surging with extremely dark mana like ink. Her eyes and expression became extremely ferocious. I'll kill you! Alusha, Naz, and Gray also got into their battle stances and stared at Kildas in front of them. It seemed that they would attack at any time. Although fists and kicks had no eyes, it was inevitable that there would be some injuries in this kind of duel. However, looking at the power of Kildas's punch, it was possible that it could have blasted a rock. As for Noah, it would not be strange even if he died, since he had taken the hit with his head. No matter how much Fairy Tale valued her companions, no matter how much she shouldn't be hostile towards her own people, under such circumstances, everyone couldn't care less. No matter what, this is too much. Alusha said angrily. Do you want to kill Noah? Don't think that we will be afraid of you just because you are an S-rank archmage. Gray also surged with mana. It seemed that he was also very angry. If anything happens to Noah, I will not let you go. Kildas. Naz gritted his teeth. Watch me take revenge for Noah. Seeing that Alusa, Naz, and Gray were surging with mana, and Mira was about to rush out with a face full of rage, Karna and Elfman were completely panicking. Say, everyone. Elfman was at a loss for what to do. Cold. Calm down. Kana stood in front of everyone and opened her arms as if she was protecting Kildas. Wait. Everyone calm down. Around them, the magic shooters from Fairy Tale also cast a reproachful look at Kildas. Just as Kildas was about to say something, Noah gently pushed her away and stood up. Everyone, don't worry. I'm fine. Noah, brother Noah. Mira, Lisanna, Elusha, and the others quickly gathered around Noah, as if they were going to take care of Noah. "You're fine?" Kildas was surprised to see that Noah seemed to be fine. "You were hit by that punch and you're fine?" "If I was hit, something must have happened." Noah smiled bitterly and raised the knight's sword in his hand and stroked it. "It helped me dodge your punch." Everyone's eyes were focused on the knight's sword in Noah's hand. "That's a magic weapon, right?" Kildas suddenly realized. "You mean it was the effect of this magic weapon that helped you dodge my punch?" "Yes." Noah nodded and held the knight's sword in front of him. "This sword can control the distance at will." Control the distance at will. This was the effect that Noah's magic knight sword had been hiding. As long as mana was infused into the sword, the wielder could control the distance at will. For example, if the distance was shortened, even if the wielder was some distance away from the opponent, the sword could still reach them. When Mira, Elfman, and Lisanna were in danger in the forest, Noah had used this effect to shorten the distance between him and the giant, saving Lisanna in time. Just now, Noah also took advantage of the moment when Kildas opened his hand and revealed a flaw to use this effect. He shortened the distance between him and Kildas to the limit and struck out with that stunning sword. After all, if the distance was reduced to 100th, the speed of the knight's sword would increase by 100 times and the force of impact would be 10,000 times greater. Moreover, Noah's sword also had the ability to negate the recoil, allowing Noah to strike with all his might at any time without worrying about being injured by the recoil. That was why the three siblings were cut in half by Noah's sword. Kildas had no choice but to get serious just now to block Noah's strike that had shortened the distance by 100 times, increased the speed by 100 times, and increased the force of impact by 10,000 times. On the other hand, as long as he used the magic knight sword to extend the distance, he could make the opponent's attack miss and nullify the opponent's attack. Noah had used this effect to nullify Kildas's punch, allowing him to remain unscathed. Of course, Noah's magic knight sword had its limits. The greater the distance that had to be shortened or extended, the more mana the wielder had to expend. Noah had magic that no one else could match, so this limitation was not a big deal. However, the magic knight sword had another limitation. The distance it could control was 100 meters. Regardless of whether the distance was shortened or extended, it could only be 100 meters. In other words, if Kilda's attack could reach 100 meters away, Noah would not be able to nullify it. Luckily, Kildas only threw a heavy punch, which could only reach a distance of 2 to 3 meters. Noah was able to use the magic knight sword to extend the distance and dodge the attack. This sword's magic effect is really rare. Kildas exclaimed and smiled at Noah. "Well, it's good that you're fine. Oh right, do you still want to continue?" "No need." Noah shook his head and looked at Kildas. "I only wanted to fight you because I wanted to see your magic." "Magic?" Everyone, including Kildas, was stunned. "Superior grade destruction spell Shatter." Noah looked straight into Kildas's eyes. "Just now, you used this magic to shatter my slash, didn't you? So you challenged me because you were curious about my magic?" Kildas didn't know whether to laugh or cry at first, but then he laughed openly. "That's right. My shatter can shatter the atomic bonds of anything it comes in contact with. It can directly break the atomic bonds from the inside. Thus, as long as it's a tangible object, even if it's a mountain or magic, I can shatter it in an instant." "Shatter a mountain?" Naz, Gray, and Elfman were shocked. "It can even shatter magic?" Mira, Lisanna, Elusha, and Kana were shocked. As expected of a super advanced destructive spell, Noah was more or less astonished, but he was even more certain of his decision. "Kildas." Noah's expression became serious as he looked straight at Kildas. "Can I learn magic from you? Learn this superior grade destruction spell Shatter." Suddenly, all the sounds in the surroundings disappeared in an instant. Mila, Lisanna, Elusa, and the others finally understood why Noah had challenged Kildas to a duel just to see Kildas's magic. Noah wanted to learn Kildas' magic. In the domain of destruction, there was almost no other magic that could be compared to this super high-level destruction magic. "Learn magic from me?" Kildas took in Noah's serious and solemn expression, and a meaningful look appeared in his eyes. "President, did he agree?" Noah was silent. Chapter 51. In fact, from the beginning, Noah was very hesitant about whether he should learn magic from Kildas. Noah was not very clear about the power of the superior level destruction spell Crush. However, from the fact that Kildas, who was definitely a 10 saint, was unable to fully control Crush and repeatedly broke things, causing Magnolia to have to modify because of it, one could roughly see the power of Crush. As for Noah, he was born with a powerful magic that others could not match. Once he learned magic, his strength would increase by leaps and bounds. With such a foundation and learning a superior level destruction spell like Crush, it was easy to imagine how strong Noah's final strength would be. However, this was where the problem lay. Even Kildas was unable to properly control Crush. Once Noah learned Crush, what kind of consequences would it cause? Originally, Noah's magic was abnormally powerful. Even in the past, due to his magic going berserk, it would cause no small amount of disasters. Now, if this magic was used to use the superior level destruction spell Crush, if he was not careful and was unable to control it like Kildas, then the disaster it would cause would definitely not be comparable to Kildas' level of disaster. Noah was finally able to completely control his magic with great difficulty. However, after learning magic, there was still the possibility of it causing a disaster. How could Noah not hesitate? After all, Noah originally worked hard to train his magic control so that he would not cause trouble for the people around him after learning magic. If learning Crush would still cause the same consequences, then it would be putting the cart before the horse. Not to mention, after a sorcerer learned magic, their magic power would also increase as they became more familiar with the magic. If Noah really did not want to cause trouble for the people around him, then he would still have to work hard in the future. This was a long way to go. Thus, when he decided to learn Crush from Kildas, Noah also took a long time to make up his mind. Thinking of this, Noah took a deep breath and nodded heavily. Although I have not told Grandfather, I think Grandfather should not oppose me. Oh, Kildas asked with great interest. Why? Because I've already made up my mind. Noah raised his head and said, once I start learning Crush, I won't return to Fairy Tale. As long as I don't control it well. Wah! The surrounding people were all shocked. Noah, big brother Noah. Mira, Lisanna, Elisha, and the others immediately panicked. However, Noah was still staring at Kildas. The look in his eyes seemed to tell Kildas how determined he was to make this decision. Kildas rubbed his head. This is going to be troublesome. When Kildas looked very distressed, an aged voice drifted into their ears from outside the crowd. Kildas. The crowd gradually opened up a path, and Makarov walked in from the outside, appearing in the eyes of everyone present. President. The surrounding people immediately called out. Grandpa. Naz and Gray hurriedly said to Makarov. You came at the right time. Quickly persuade Noah. Grandpa. Noah looked at Makarov, who was slowly walking towards him, and remained silent. President. Kildas glanced at Makarov and shrugged his shoulders. You came at the right time. I don't know what to do. Kildas. Makarov grinned. Just agree to Noah's request. President. Mira, Lisanna, and the others all called out. Makarov immediately raised his hand and suppressed the voices of the surrounding people. He walked in front of Noah and fixed his eyes on him as he said, Have you really made up your mind? Yes. Noah, who had hesitated for an entire day before making up his mind, nodded without hesitation. I've already made up my mind. Then it's fine. Makarov did not hesitate and turned his gaze to Kildas. Kildas, is there anything that's inconvenient for you? I don't mind. Kildas spread his hands like a hoodlum. Although the Crush spell is very precious because it is a super high-level destruction spell, it is also very difficult to learn and control. Usually, people who seek stability will not choose this spell. Now that there is someone who wants to learn it, I will not hide this spell. After that, Kildas changed the topic again. However, I don't have the patience to stay in one place for so long, and I don't have that much time to teach others either. So let me go back and write down Crush so that Noah can learn it himself. That works too. Noah nodded and agreed with a smile on his face. Thank you, Kildas. Well, take it as a reward for forcing me to retreat, and an apology for almost hurting you when I accidentally got serious. Kildas turned around and waved at Noah. Then I'll go back first. The spellbook should be ready by today. You can come to my place tomorrow to get it. With that, Kildas walked out of the crowd and headed back to his house. Just like that, a storm that was neither too big nor too small was settled. Noah, have you really made up your mind? As soon as he returned to Fairy Tale, Gray couldn't wait to ask the question. You won't return to Fairy Tale before you learn how to control magic? Are you serious? That's a super powerful spell that even Kildas can't control. Lysana's voice carried a hint of grievance. If Big Brother Noah can't learn it, then you won't come back, right? The crush spell is indeed very powerful, but didn't you say that the more powerful the spell, the better? Even Mira couldn't help but feel a little anxious. There are so many spells in the library. I don't believe that you can't find what you want. How about you think about it a little more? Elisha seemed to have an opposing opinion. I think that everyone has a point. You should think about it a little more. Naz, Kana, and Elfman all nodded, showing that they agreed with everyone's opinion. His gaze swept across the faces of his friends in front of him one by one, and Noah sighed. I say, can't you have a little more confidence in me? What Kildas can't do you think that I can't do it? I said that I won't return to Fairy Tale, but I won't go anywhere. Without giving anyone a chance to explain, Noah directly explained. I just want to find a place nearby where there is no one to stay and concentrate on practicing magic. Even if I don't return to the guild, I won't go anywhere. Nearby? Lysana quickly asked. Is it the river bank? No, I plan to go to the mountains nearby. Noah smiled. After all, what I want to learn is the most outstanding spell in the field of destruction, Crush. If I'm not careful and destroy that place, then it'll be troublesome. I don't want to personally bury the place where I've been staying for almost 2 years. This. Everyone suddenly looked at each other. Have a little more confidence in me. Noah ended the conversation with this sentence. I'll definitely come back. Seeing that Noah wasn't going to change his mind, everyone had nothing to say and could only helplessly nod. The next day, at the foot of a medium-sized mountain near Magnolia, Noah appeared, carrying a cloth bag with a knight's sword. Looking up, Noah looked at the medium-sized mountain in front of him and raised his hand. Looking closely in Noah's hand, there was a pile of paper full of words lying on top of it. Noah slightly raised the corner of his mouth and walked towards the mountain in front of him. Chapter 52. Magnolia, Fairy Tale. Pushing open the doors of the guild, Mira, Elfman and Lisa walked in and greeted their companions in the guild. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. The elders of the guild also greeted him casually, following which they continued to chat and joke around. It's a little late today. Alusa, who was sitting at a wooden table and eating a strawberry cake, said in boredom. Usually you guys would be here by now. It's all because of Elfman. Mira glared at Elfman with a dissatisfied expression. If Elfman hadn't spilled our breakfast, we would have been here long ago. Ugh. Elfman lowered his head. Undoubtedly, he was so big, but he acted as if he was bullied. I just wanted to eat my breakfast quickly. Luckily, it's just breakfast. It'll be fine after a simple meal. Lysana tilted her head and smiled cutely. But if Big Sis Mira didn't see that there wasn't much time left and decided to cook, I would have been even later. Mira can cook. Elisha seemed to be shocked and stood up in surprise. Mira can cook? Are you trying to pick a fight? You stubborn woman. Mira laughed sinisterly. I couldn't find a chance to teach you a lesson. Today I'll beat you to the ground. I'm the one who made you cry. Elisha glared back. I've tolerated you for a long time. Today I'll teach you a lesson. After saying that, the two of them immediately stood up aggressively. They even bumped their heads together, causing Lysana to sigh and complain. What do you mean you couldn't find a chance and tolerated me for a long time? Don't you guys fight every day? Are they fighting every day? Kana rubbed her forehead and looked into the distance. It's the same over there. As soon as Kana finished her words, a series of crackling sounds could be heard. You stepped on me. Hang your eyes. You're blocking my way. Lower your eyes. Naz's and Gray's heads collided fiercely as they glared at each other. They looked like they were about to fight at any time. It was simply a replica of Mira and Elisha. Hey, can't you guys grow up a little? Kana said in a bad mood. If you quarrel and bicker every day, people will think that you have not grown up. It's time for you to be more mature, like Noah. Halfway through her sentence, Karna's voice gradually became softer. When she mentioned the last name, her voice directly disappeared. Noah. Naz and Gray, who originally looked like they could fight at any time, had their expressions sunk at the same time. They didn't say anything. The sinister atmosphere around Mira and Alusha also disappeared. They both snorted and turned their heads away, not saying a word. Big brother Noah. Lisana's expression was a little depressed as she forced a smile. I almost forgot that Big brother Noah isn't in the guild. I was just thinking if I should go and wake him up. No one answered. Everyone was silent, causing the surrounding atmosphere to become more or less heavy. That guy. Mira bit her lips and said in a slightly resentful tone. He decided that kind of thing on his own. He didn't even think about how the people on our side would feel. Well, big sister Mira, don't blame big brother Noah. Lisa collected her emotions and hugged Myra's arm. After all, big brother Noah is only nearby. We can go and see him at any time. That's what he said. Alusha asked. Do any of you know where Noah went to train? Yesterday, he said he was going to a nearby mountain. Gray said in a casual tone as he casually took off his clothes. But he didn't say which mountain it was. Doesn't that mean we can't find him? Mira frowned and looked in the direction of the bar. Guildmaster, do you know where Noah is? Who knows? Makarov, who was drinking at the bar, was the least concerned about it. He said weakly. Anyway, he'll be back when it's time. Until then, let's take our time. Before Makarov could finish his sentence, something happened that ruthlessly interrupted him. Boom! An earth-shattering sound suddenly reverberated throughout the sky of Magnolia, turning into an echo that reverberated throughout the fairy tale guild. Ah! Many girls in the guild screamed, and the others all cried out in alarm. What's wrong? Mira, Lisana, and Alusha all stood up abruptly. What's going on? This manna. Makarov, who was sitting leisurely at the bar, also stood up. His lazy expression instantly turned serious as he ran out. Seeing Makarov run out, Mira and the others looked at each other and ran out as well. Huff, 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 huff. Almost everyone in Fairy Tale ran out of the guild and followed behind Makarov. They ran along the street in a certain direction. After passing through 2 streets and many tall buildings, Makarov led the members of Fairy Tale out of Magnolia. After an unknown amount of time, the scene in front of them gradually widened, and the number of buildings in the surroundings decreased. The members of Fairy Tale also arrived at the wilderness and continued to run forward. Undoubtedly Makarov, who had been running at the front, was already old, but his face was not red nor was he out of breath. When he saw a figure appear in front of him, he was startled and stopped. Kildas? Oh! Kildas turned around and saw that Makarov had brought the entire fairy tale over. His eyes widened in shock. Why are you all here? How could we not come with such a big commotion? Mira replied bluntly. By the way, what's going on? What's going on? Kildas let out a rare sigh and let them go. Why don't you see for yourself? As Kildas moved aside, the members of Fairy Tale subconsciously gathered their gazes in front of them. Pa! The sound of something falling to the ground could be heard. However, no one cared about what it was that had fallen to the ground. Everyone present, including Makarov, was stunned on the spot. Their faces were full of shock. This was because in front of them there was a pile of rubble. Of course, if it was just a pile of rubble, they would not be in such a state. The problem was that if everyone remembered correctly, the location of the pile of rubble should have been a mountain. But now the mountain was gone. No, it should not be said that the mountain was gone. It should be said that the mountain was broken. That pile of rubble was the original mountain. What? What's going on? Lisana asked in a daze. Where's the mountain? No one answered Lisana's question. Obviously, no one was able to recover from their shock. Cough, cough, cough. At this moment, a light cough could be heard. At the top of the pile of rubble, a hand came out and pushed away all the rubble. Then a head popped out and coughed non-stop. Damn it! It's hard to control. Seeing the person coming out from the top of the pile of rubble, everyone was stunned. Noah! Noah looked at the dumbfounded crowd and his expression became awkward. I didn't do it on purpose. For a moment no one could speak. Chapter 53. While the number of mountains around Magnolia couldn't be considered many, they definitely weren't few either. If they were connected into a mountain range, they would be able to encircle Magnolia 20 to 30 times. However, even so, the sudden disappearance of a mountain still attracted the attention of many townsfolk. That was why Villa Magnolia was even noisier than usual these past 2 days. Almost everywhere, one could hear people talking about the disappearance of a mountain. They were so excited about it that it was reduced to idle chatter after meals. While everyone in Magnolia was talking about this matter, the culprit behind it all appeared in the wilderness not far from Magnolia. Noah stood in the open field with his eyes closed, motionless like a statue fixed in place. Not far away, Mira and Lisanna, who had been here for quite some time, were quietly watching this scene. Ever since he turned the nearby mountain into a pile of rubble 2 days ago, Noah no longer dared to find a random mountain to stay in. Instead, he found a place where no one would come under normal circumstances, and built a simple stone house to stay in. Noah knew that he was born with a physique that was different from ordinary people. Not only was his body immune to all negative powers and side effects, but he was also able to absorb powers that didn't belong to him but entered his body. He was also able to recover his mana on his own. He also possessed mana that others couldn't match and extraordinary senses. Other things aside, just his extraordinary mana meant that once Noah learned magic, his strength would definitely increase by leaps and bounds. Furthermore, the magic that Noah had chosen to use was the superior level destruction magic Crush. Using such a powerful magic to cast Crush, the power of Crush was absolutely astonishing. Undoubtedly, Noah knew that he had miscalculated. In the end, Noah still underestimated himself. He really didn't think that he would be able to turn an entire mountain into rubble after learning Crush for less than a day. If he had known that this would happen, Noah definitely wouldn't have chosen to stay in a mountain. Instead, he would have found a deserted place to stay. Of course, even if this was the case, Noah's path to learning magic could not be said to be peaceful. If someone happened to pass by here, they would definitely be shocked. Because in this extremely vast and uninhabited wilderness, on the ground, there were many deep pits of various sizes. The large ones were at least 200 to 300 meters in diameter, while the small ones were at least 40 to 50 meters in diameter. It was as if they were directly hit by a continuous stream of meteorites. It was extremely shocking. These deep craters were the result of Noah's practice of Crush over the past 2 days, or when he was unable to control Crush. It was also because of these craters that Mira and Lisanna, who understood that Noah, who had learned Crush, would not be able to hide from them, were able to easily find him. Looking at Noah standing there motionless, Lisanna was a little confused. What is Big Brother Noah doing? This? Mira pondered for a moment before replying. If I'm not wrong, that guy should be familiarizing himself with the sensation of Crush. Right? The sensation of Crush ? Lisanna was even more confused, her face full of confusion. When people clench their fists and exert strength, isn't it very easy to feel that their clenched fists are filled with strength? Mira explained. It's the same for magic. If magic is compared to strength when a sorcerer uses magic, they will definitely be able to feel their magic converging in some way. Noah is now familiarizing himself with the sensation of activating magic. What's the point of doing this? Lisanna blinked. Isn't it fine as long as he can use magic? Why does he have to familiarize himself with the sensation of activating magic? Of course, other people wouldn't do this for nothing, but Noah does, Mira said gloatingly. I think he must want to familiarize himself with the sensation of activating magic. That way, even if he can't control it, he can react in time and make a response. Just like before, if Noah had run out of the mountain in time when he lost control of his magic, the mountain wouldn't have disappeared. Well, but this is also good for him. Mira crossed her arms in front of her chest. As long as he can familiarize himself with the sensation of activating magic and grasp that moment, it will be helpful to his cultivation of controlling magic. Is that so? Lisanna muttered, her voice full of hesitation. I originally wanted to see Big Brother Noah, but now he's working hard on his cultivation. What should I do? What do you mean, what should we do? Can't we just go directly? Mira didn't have as many concerns as Lysana and walked directly in the direction of Noah. "Wait, big sister Mira." "Really?" Lysana hurriedly followed. In front of her, Noah closed his eyes and stood quietly. Within Noah's body, magic flowed methodically under Noah's control and slowly grew stronger. Feeling the magic power in his body, Noah nodded inwardly. Recalling how to use Crush, he immediately wanted to use it. At this moment, the sound of Mira and Lysana's footsteps entered Noah's ears. He was about to cast a spell when he heard them. It was also at this moment that the magic in Noah's body began to flow faster. In a short moment, it was like a wild horse that had broken free of its reins and flowed according to the method of activating the magic that Noah was about to use. Not good. Noah was alarmed. This was the precursor to the activation of Crush. Sensing this, Noah hurriedly turned his head and shouted at Mira and Lysana. "Don't come over." Mira and Lysana both froze at the same time and reflexively stopped in their tracks. At the same time, a dazzling light burst out from Noah's body and expanded in all directions like a shockwave. Seeing the shockwave of light rush towards them, Mira and Lysana turned pale with fright. In their hurry, they only had time to raise their hands to block in front of their eyes before their slender bodies were swallowed up by the dazzling light. Boom! A huge sound suddenly rang out. That was the sound of the ground being covered by the light from Noah's body turning into a pile of rubble that was neither too big nor too small, creating a deep crater. After a while, the light dissipated. Standing in the crater, Noah's heartbeat suddenly sped up. Could it be that Mira and Lysana had been? "What's going on?" That gave me a fright. Fortunately, the nightmare that he had imagined did not come. Mira and Lysana were still standing in the same place. Although there was shock on their faces, they were not injured, nor were they missing an arm or a leg. "Mira! Lysana!" Only then did Noah put down the huge rock in his heart. But when he thought of the worst-case scenario, his face immediately tensed up. However, before Noah could reprimand the two of them, something unexpected happened. Rip! With a tearing sound, pieces of cloth of different colors flew off from Mira and Lysana's bodies. Those were Mira and Lysana's clothes. In the next moment, two equally tender, fair, and charming bodies were exposed to the sunlight without any obstruction. They were also exposed to Noah's eyes, becoming a beautiful scene that Noah would never forget for the rest of his life. Looking at the two charming and tender bodies in front of him, Noah's eyes widened, and his mouth slowly opened wide. Mira and Lysana felt a chill run down their spines. They lowered their heads and looked at their own bodies. When that familiar fair and delicate figure entered their field of vision, the two girls' minds went blank and their faces flushed red in a second. A few seconds later, two screams resounded above the crater-filled field for a long time.